The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com. It's Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from a book edited by Rex Stout back in the 1940s. It's titled The Illustrious Dunderheads, and it's speeches given mostly by Republican congressmen in Congress on the floor of the House and the Senate, talking about how we should not support England or Britain in their fight against Hitler, and how Hitler's a guy we can work with and all this sort of thing. If you saw the Churchill movie, Darkest Hour, this book will ring a lot of bells for you. It's out of print. There are used copies floating around. This is a copy my father gave me as a gift years ago. So, The Illustrious Dunderheads by Rex Stout. It's a collection of speeches, as I said. The first one is by George Bender, the Republican representative from Ohio. And this is July 11, 1940. I wish to call attention to the statement made by an expert, Colonel Lindbergh. Quote, "Let us not be confused by this talk of invasion by European aircraft. The air defense of America is as simple as the attack is difficult when the true facts are faced. We are in danger of a war today not because the European people have attempted to interfere with the internal affairs of America, but because American people have attempted to interfere with the internal affairs of Europe. Regardless of which side wins the war, there is no reason, aside from our own actions, to prevent a continuation of peaceful relationships between America and the countries of Europe." Then on September 3rd, 1940, he said, "Any device at all that suits the convenience of the president." Keep in mind, FDR was president, and the Republicans didn't want to fight against Hitler because they thought it would get FDR elected for a third term as a wartime president. That was what this was all about. "Any device at all that suits the convenience of the president is used in order to get us into this war by the back door. The power of peacetime conscription in the hands of an administration that is proved by its record to have used every conceivable excuse for regimenting America, overturning all tradition, and changing our form of government is nothing but an invitation to disaster. We know that our people hate everything that Hitler stands for. We despise dictatorship in any form, but I challenge anyone to tell us the difference between executive orders issued by Roosevelt and those issued by Hitler." Republicans in 1940. But wait, there's more. This is from Hamilton Fish, Republican representative from New York State. This is June 22nd, 1940. "Colonel Lindbergh was right when he said in one of his recent speeches, 'Let us stop this hysterical chatter about calamity and invasion that has been running rife these past few days. It is not fitting to the people who built this nation. The only reason we are in danger to becoming involved in this war is because there are powerful elements in America who desire to take part in a war against Hitler.'" Then on June 22nd, 1940, he gave a speech at the House of Representatives. He says, "Let us have an end to the secret diplomacy and the secret commitments of President Roosevelt that have brought ruin and disaster to France and from which we have escaped only by a miracle, and the will of the American people expressed through Congress to keep America out of war." This was the America First movement back then. President Roosevelt alarmed the nation by his inflammatory Italian dagger thrust in the heart speech. And on August 5th, Republican Representative Hamilton Fish said, "Whom do we fear? Do we fear Hitler, who seems afraid to attack England over 20 miles of sea when he would have 3,000 miles to cross here? This is preposterous. Let us stop this fear hysteria." And then on September 3rd, he said on the floor of the House, Republican Representative Fish of New York, "Peacetime conscription in America is the direct road to Hitlerism, dictatorship, and National Socialism." See, he didn't want Roosevelt to start the draft. "If we adopt peacetime conscription, we are merely copying Nazi methods and ideology. Mr. Speaker, this Roosevelt Far Eastern policy of bluff and bluster has driven Japan into the hands of Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. No one in Japan really wants war with the United States, but it's quite evident that this highly proud and militaristic nation has got tired of being threatened and slapped in the face by us. We must not let our sympathies run away with our judgment and involve us in any Asiatic war 10,000 miles away that has no connection to the defense of the American continent. We have more to fear from the war makers within our country than from our enemies without. Yeah, got more to fear from Franklin Roosevelt than from Adolf Hitler. This is from Claire Hoffman, Republican representative of Michigan. And this is from a speech that Mr. Hoffman gave September 7, 1940. Mr. Speaker, down into the hell of a war, in no sense our war, this president would plunge us to satisfy his ambition to break the American tradition that no man should be elected a third time to the presidency, and in order that he may go down in history as America's first dictator. Yes, this is Republicans speaking on the floor of the House of Representatives, calling FDR a dictator in 1940. This is 1 year after Hitler had invaded Poland. Back to the quote. He told us, in effect, that we had no national defense, that we were open to successful invasion by a foreign foe. Thus, he created fear and hysteria. As on other occasions, when he had satisfied his penchant for theatrics by shouting "fire, fire," and calling Congress in special session at a cost of $500,000, he, figuratively speaking, now tucks his tongue in his cheek and goes off on a vacation. It is to be hoped on this one he will not, as he did on a prior occasion, see a mythical submarine. Roosevelt's threat to use the sovereignty of government is the threat of a Hitler, of a Mussolini, a Stalin, to silence all opposition and all criticism. He has consistently arrayed class against class, preached envy and jealousy, the doctrine of hatred and fear, and his egotism is only equaled by his ignorance when we assume that patriotic Americans will tamely submit. The illustrious Dunderheads.
I'm Nina Turner, and you're watching Free Speech TV.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Happy New Year. It's our first, full non-holiday day of 2018. My entire life, the first couple of weeks of the new year, I always, we used to write checks. Now, I guess it's more online banking and whatnot, but I would always get the year wrong. But here it is, 2018. It's amazing. And as we're going forward, sometimes it's useful to look back. And I'm not talking about, any kind of wrap-up or anything like that. I'm talking about looking back to 1940 to get some sense of where we might be or we might be going. History does, what's the old saying? History doesn't move in cycles, but it does rhyme, or, words to that effect. Anyway, Louise and I over the weekend went to see Darkest Hour, the new movie about Churchill, and about this roughly month and a half long period in the history of England when Chamberlain stepped down, Churchill became the prime minister, and made the decision to take the United Kingdom into World War II. And it's an amazing movie, and I highly recommend it. And in the movie, Churchill calls Franklin Roosevelt. And I'm not, I hope I'm not spoiling the movie for you. I can't imagine that I am, because all of this stuff is history. I mean, we all know the story. We know exactly what happened. We know how it turned out. It's just so brilliantly performed and brilliantly acted. And there's, and his relationship with King George VI, and just there's just all kinds of really cool stuff in there. But at one point in the movie, he calls FDR and says, "Help!" Right? I mean, his army is trapped in France, literally entire army, 300,000 British soldiers. His army is trapped in France. The Nazis have enclosed it, have largely encircled it. They're trying to get them off the continent and back to the UK. And he's just facing this terrible crisis, and he calls FDR and he says, "We need your help." And FDR says, "I can't do it. Congress passed a law saying I can't help you against the Nazis." And in fact, Congress did pass that law. When my dad was still alive, this was maybe 30 years ago or thereabouts, my father gave me for Christmas one year, as I recall, it might have been my birthday. My dad was a book collector. He had 20,000 books in his basement. And my dad gave me as a gift this book edited by Rex Stout. Rex Stout was the guy who created Nero Wolfe, the fictional detective. And he was the most widely read, widely published author in the United States in the 1940s. The Nero Wolfe series was, he'd sold over 70 million books. And during World War II, he worked in the Bureau of Propaganda to, help encourage Americans to fight World War II. And after World War II, he compiled a list of speeches that were given by members of Congress, the House and the Senate, on the floor of the House and Senate. These were all public speeches, urging the United States not to help the United Kingdom in their fight with Hitler, which, as I said, led to this law that you will see in this movie, Darkest Hour, which I strongly recommend you go see. It's just an amazing movie. I actually had tears in my eyes a couple times during the movie. It's just a brilliant movie. So they were virtually all Republicans. This was the America First movement. We don't need to defend Europe. Let Hitler do whatever he's doing. Well, let me just read you some of the speeches. This is from George Bender, a Republican from Ohio. He says, I wish to call attention to a statement made by an expert, Colonel Lindbergh. Now, you'll recall Charles Lindbergh was saying, hey, Hitler's not so bad, and we don't need to. He was, one of the champions of the America First movement. Anyhow, he says, he's quoting from Lindbergh, quote, let us not be confused by this talk of invasion by European aircraft. See, in other words, don't worry, there's no threat from Hitler coming to the United States. He says, the air defense of America is as simple as the attack is difficult when the true facts are faced. We are in danger of a war today, not because the European people have attempted to interfere with the internal affairs of America, but because American people have attempted to interfere with the internal affairs of Europe. Oh my God. We're upset with Hitler. Regardless of which side wins the war, they're still quoting from Charles Lindbergh. Regardless of which side wins the war, there is no reason, aside from our own actions, to prevent a continuation of peaceful relationships between America and the countries of Europe. In other words, Lindbergh saying, if Hitler takes over Europe, that's fine. We can do business with Hitler. And then you get into the real reason for this. The real reason that the Republicans were fighting so hard to prevent FDR from going to war in 1940 was because they believed that if FDR entered the war in Europe in 1940, keep in mind in 1939 Hitler had invaded Poland, if we entered the war in 1940, then the belief was that FDR would win a third term as president, which, by the way, happened. But they didn't want that to happen. And they thought that FDR, the Republicans asserted that FDR was trying to generate war with Europe just to become a third-term president. So here, again, this is Republican Congressman, Ohio Republican Congressman George Bender. Any device at all that suits the convenience of President Roosevelt in order to get us into this war by the back door, the power of peacetime conscription in the hands of an administration that is proved by its record to have used every conceivable excuse for regimenting America, overturning all tradition, and changing our form of government, is nothing but an invitation to disaster. You get this? He's saying the Franklin Roosevelt administration throughout the 1930s, by saving America from the Great Depression, the Republican Great Depression, regimented America. Yes, we forced, companies to pay into unemployment insurance funds. FDR created unemployment insurance. We required people to pay into Social Security. Oh my God. Overturning all tradition. Yes, let's integrate the Army. And changing our form of government. Well, FDR sort of did. I mean, we became more of a democratic socialist country. But the Republicans were not at all happy about that. This is Hamilton Fish. He is the Republican from New York. This is June 22nd, 1940. Again, this is, leading up to the election of 1940. Colonel Lindbergh was right when he said in one of his recent speeches, let us stop this hysterical chatter about calamity and invasion that has been running rife in these last few days. It is not fitting for the people who built this nation. The only reason we're in danger to becoming involved in this war is because there are powerful elements in America who desire to take part in it. Let us have an end to the secret diplomacy and the secret commitments of President Roosevelt that have brought ruin and disaster to France, and from which we have escaped only by a miracle and the will of the American people expressed through Congress to keep America out of the war. President Roosevelt alarmed the nation by his inflammatory Italian dagger thrust in the heart speech. Whom do we fear? Do we fear Hitler, who seems afraid to attack England over 20 miles of sea when he would have to cross 3,000 miles to get here? This is preposterous. Let us stop this fear hysteria. And then the Republican representative from New York, Hamilton Fish, on the floor of the House of Representatives, September 3rd, 1940, FDR was talking about maybe we should start a draft. And he says, peacetime conscription in America is the direct road to Hitlerism, dictatorship, and National Socialism. If we adopt peacetime conscription, we are merely copying Nazi methods and ideology. We have much more to fear from the war makers from within than from our enemies without. Right? We have more to fear from FDR than we do from Hitler. It's incredible. But we're back there again, where the Republicans are basically selling out their country for political gain. And this only this time they have Republican control of the House, the Senate, the White House, and the Supreme Court. But this is the direction that they're going. Anyhow, we'll be back. We're talking about what might happen in the new year.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And what are your plans for the new year? I plan to stay active. We'll be back. And welcome back. Rita watching Free Speech TV in Chipley, Florida. Hey, Rita, what's up?
Yes, I'd like to ask you a question. President Butthead is complaining about sorry. Iran civil war.
Well, it's not a civil war yet, but
in a couple of years we'll be doing that because of his tax cuts.
I beg your pardon?
He's been complaining about what's going on in Iran.
Oh, you think that Trump is trying to divert us from the damage the tax cuts are going to do to working people by ginning up a war with Iran?
You know, think of that. Look what's going on there.
Yeah, it's a possibility.
President Butthead.
Well, you know, yeah, you can call him that if you want. I'll just call him Trump.
I'm 66 years old, and I'm scared.
Yeah. You know, Rita, I think a lot of, we're the same age, by the way. I think a lot of us are very concerned about, you know, where this country is going, the direction that we're headed, the direction that this president is taking us, and larger than that, the direction that the Republican Party is taking us. And rather than being scared, what we need to do is convert that concern into positive energy. We need to well, we already have. We have a positive vision, a positive agenda for America. We need to move forward with it.
Well, that's okay. I keep calling my so-called senator, Mark, or the dumb idiot. I told him I don't have a dime. And Paul Ryan's going to make sure I don't. I'm on Social Security. Right. But I told him, I said, I will make it my life's mission to make sure you wouldn't even get elected for dog catcher. If you treat humans this way, how would you be with animals? Yeah, yeah. Well, Trump doesn't like animals, but yeah, excellent point. Trump don't like anybody but Trump. Yeah, I'm with you. Rita, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Randy in Ottawa, Iowa. Hey, Randy, what's up?
Happy New Year, Tom.
Thanks, back at you.
To you, and thank you for coming back and everybody that works with you. I have two things. I watched C-SPAN this morning, and basically we're talking about the farm program and raising the debt limit. Here we are. 12 months into Trump's presidency, and we're already back. The debt clock is going the wrong way. I mean, we're going to have to raise the deficit again. And it took 18 months for President Bush, because we had a $360 billion surplus when he took office.
Right.
So, these are the things that my point is that debt is oppression. That the Republicans saddling us with this debt, or the Jude Wanniski theory, killing the two Santa Claus,
right.
that this is oppression, like what you're talking about, like what these Republicans are trying to pull earlier in the century.
Yeah, I don't disagree, Randy. Randy, I'm sorry we're hitting the break here, but your point is well taken and well made. Randy, thanks so much for watching Free Speech and for the call. We'll be right back.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them
in standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you 24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Oh my, oh my, oh my. So, is the Republican Party still made up of illustrious dunderheads? Basically, the first question. In the 1940s, they were willing to sell out our country to Hitler in order to prevent Franklin Roosevelt from becoming president for a third term. Is the same thing happening, essentially? Now, some would say, oh yeah, they're selling out our country to Russia. I'm a little more skeptical of that, but I think that they're clearly selling out our country to the oligarchs within our country and the oligarchs around the world. Some of them are probably Russian oligarchs, certainly Chinese oligarchs and European oligarchs and South American oligarchs. And let's not forget the Saudi oligarchs. Billionaires around the world basically owning the Trump administration. So there's that. What is this going to bring us in the next year when the Republican Party institutionally in 1940 essentially committed treason, saying we should not, just let Hitler kill the Jews, just let Hitler take over Europe. It's not a big deal. He's an okay guy. He's a right-winger just like us, right? And now you've got the Republican Party, kind of going down that same path of America first. No, we're not going to intervene in the world, and we're not going to, or maybe we are, but we're only going to do it in a way that trashes Muslims, really? By the way, Muslims for Progressive Values, mpv.org, a great organization. I was reminded of that over the weekend. So, a second question I wanted to put on the plate for conversation today. Which sounds better to you, a guaranteed basic income or a federal job guarantee? That's the headline that Eve Smith posted over at Naked Capitalism last week. And it's a reprint of an article by Howie Klein that was originally published over at Down with Tyranny. And it's a takeoff on a year-old piece in Jacobin magazine, Why We Need a Federal Job Guarantee. And basically there's, you've got at the beginning, you've got basically raw capitalism, an economic system where those with capital basically own the system. It's a neo-feudal system. It's a reinvention of a form of economics and politics that ruled Europe and Asia and South America, you know, for millennia. And this is the modern version of it. You know, just at-will employment, right to work for less states. The employer has all the power. The employee has no power. So you've got that. That's kind of the starting point. And that's where we were, you know, when we started the Republic. And then unions rose and workers demanded rights and citizens demanded regulations to protect themselves from being poisoned by big companies or being, you know, robbed by big companies, et cetera. And then we went from a raw capitalism to regulated capitalism, which seems like a good first step. And now there's like 2 steps beyond that. What do you do when capitalism itself starts to fail? And at least in this context, the capitalism equals jobs formula. Because what is happening increasingly in this era of monopoly or oligopoly, you know, a small number of very large corporations owning everything from our media to our food supply to everything else, you know, we're seeing this extraordinary concentration of power. And with that, and they're using that power to reduce our wages, reduce our benefits, and you know, make us all poorer, basically, so that the 1% can get richer. And that's exactly what's been going on ever since the Reagan presidency kicked off this process. So what do you do about it? Well, there's a couple of solutions. One that has come out of Europe is the universal basic income. Everybody gets a certain amount of money every year, say $10,000, whether they work or not, no matter what they do. The problem with the UBI is that it is hard to understand and easy to attack. It doesn't make a good bumper sticker. So what they're recommending is that instead of doing the UBI, we do what Franklin Roosevelt did in the 1930s, which worked spectacularly well. It got us out of the Great Depression. And that was, the way that he put it together was, as long as the federal unemployment rate was above 25%, the federal government offered and guaranteed jobs to people. We did it through all these acronym agencies, the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, on and on they went, right? There were all these organizations that Roosevelt created, or that were created as a result of the New Deal, that were basically government jobs. And so this is called a federal job guarantee, an FJG, federal job guarantee. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why a federal job guarantee would be a good thing. Number one, there would be fewer poor Americans. Why? Because the federal job would come with a reasonable wage, and it would become the new wage floor. Howie Klein is suggesting that the federal job guarantee should be jobs that pay at least $23,000 a year, rising to a median of $32,000 a year. Federal jobs could provide socially useful goods and services. We need to rebuild our roads. We need to take care of our national parks. Our infrastructure is in shambles. These would be good jobs. And it provides a social environment for people in the workplace. It provides a wage floor. It stabilizes our economy. What's not to like about this? Can you knock this down?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I can't come up with even one good reason why we should not have a federal job guarantee. We'll discuss it after this and everything else that's going on. Stick around.
And welcome back to our Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Devil's Bargain by Joshua Green, the subtitle Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storming of the Presidency. This is from the afterword, the very last chapter. It's titled Kali Yuga, which in Hinduism is when the earth goes into a phase of destruction. In the shell-shocked aftermath of the election, President Obama, looking shaken, appeared in the White House Rose Garden to deliver public remarks intended to project a sense of calm. A sense, really, that the basic stability of our country remained intact. Sun is up, Obama said. I know everybody had a long night. I did as well.
I had a chance to talk to President-elect Trump last night about 3:30 in the morning, I think it was, to congratulate him on winning the election." End of quote. The next day, when the two men appeared together in the Oval Office, it felt as if the world had slipped through the looking glass. Trump quickly named Bannon his chief White House strategist. Republicans controlled every branch of government. With Trump's ability to defy every political norm, anything seemed possible. Who could argue otherwise after what had just transpired? And yet, within days of his inauguration, Trump's White House was plunged into chaos and scandal from which it has not recovered and may never. Bannon, the imaginative reconceiver of U.S. politics, hung streams of paper listing Trump's promises from the walls of his West Wing office. His strategy, as always, was to launch furious attacks, this time to, quote, shock the system, end quote, and rapidly reorient the federal government in a more nationalist direction. He called this, with what I took to be intentional irony, a shock and awe approach to asserting Trump's power. But Trump's flurry of activity quickly ran into problems. There was his executive order, sprung a week after his inauguration, banning immigrants from 7 majority Muslim countries, which set off nationwide protests and was blocked by the courts. His firing 2 weeks later of National Security Director Michael Flynn for contacts with the Russians. The collapse of his first major legislative initiative, a bill to repeal Obamacare. His firing of FBI Director James Comey. And the swift descent of the West Wing into a viper's nest of backstabbing and leaks. This quick turn toward a crack-up was hardly unforeseeable or even altogether surprising, but it contrasted sharply with the success of a candidate who had dominated his opponents, shaped news coverage, and shown himself to be all but impervious to the forces that overwhelm other politicians. Bannon, whose wild gambits in the campaign had invariably paid off, seemed to run out of magic tricks when Hillary Clinton was no longer a target. The government wasn't as malleable to Trump and Bannon's aggressions as the Republican Party and the cable news channels had been, and they found themselves consistently thwarted and undermined by the courts, by right-wing hardliners in Congress, by their own inexperience and Trump's errant tweets, and by the bureaucracy they were now overseeing. The crises these failures precipitated in the White House cost Bannon much of his influence and soon threatened Trump's presidency. While it's still early in his term, the possibilities that Trump's most ardent supporters once imagined for his presidency already seem to be mostly foreclosed. I think there are 3 main reasons why Trump's administration has so quickly fallen into disorder and confusion. Number 1, Trump thought being president was about asserting dominance. Just after he'd locked up the GOP nominations, Trump said something to me that crystallized his view of politics and explains, to my mind, much of his subsequent difficulties. Quote, "I deal with people that are very extraordinarily talented people," he told me. "I deal with Steve Wynn. I deal with Carl Icahn. I deal with killers that blow these politicians away. It's not even the same category. This," he meant politics, "this is a category that's like 19 levels lower. You understand what I'm saying? Brilliant killers." Trump was equating politics with business and the presidency with the job of being a big shot CEO, a killer. He filled the upper ranks of his administration with people of a similar mindset. Gary Cohn, Wilbur Ross, Steve Bannon, aggressive, domineering men accustomed to getting their way by dint of their position. None had government experience, nor did many others in the West Wing. So none anticipated the problems this approach to governing would cause. Trump's self-conception as the all-powerful apprentice boss blinded him to a fundamental truth of the modern presidency, that the president needs Congress more than the Congress needs the president. Trump's domineering instinct served him poorly, since most members of Congress are secure in their jobs and accountable mainly to their own constituents. And it backfired disastrously when Trump fired Comey after he refused to submit to a pledge of loyalty to his boss. Number 2, Trump ran against the Republican Party, Wall Street, and Paul Ryan, but then took up their agenda. Populists often struggle to govern, but Trump scarcely attempted to lead the populist revolution that he promised. In May, he told me he would transform the Republican Party into a workers' party. But while he kept voicing populist shibboleths, the legislative agenda he took up was the standard conservative fare pushed by Paul Ryan. During the GOP primary, Trump has shrewdly sensed its weak point, Ryan's desire to finance tax cuts for the rich by cutting programs like Social Security and Medicaid, harmed the party's white blue-collar base. Trump told me he'd made this point to Ryan directly. He He said, quote, "There's no way a Republican is going to beat a Democrat when the Republican is saying we're going to cut your Social Security, and the Democrat is saying we're going to keep it and give you more." The book is Devil's Bargain by Joshua Green, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storm for the President.
Thom Hartmann podcast at thomhartmann.com/podcast. They're commercial free and you can listen anytime, any place you want.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Boy, oh boy, what an extraordinary year. I just wanted to share with you one other quick thing. This is from the Washington Post today, the Daily 202, and by James Hohmann. And what he says, the essence of the article is that if you really want to know the priorities of the Republican Party and the Donald Trump administration, all you have to do is look at the news dump over the holidays, where they just, you know, they put out the stuff, excuse me, they put out the stuff that they basically wanted buried. And he starts out by saying the fireworks seen at Mar-a-Lago on New Year's Eve were paid for by billionaire industrialist David Koch, according to the Palm Beach Daily News, as part of another private party put on by an even more exclusive club. That was at the Flagler Museum down the street from Donald Trump's Gilded Age place. And so, you know, he says this is the new Gilded Age, and here's what's going on. These are the things that Trump did that were announced over the Christmas holiday, New Year's holiday, that you might have missed because, hey, who's watching the news, right? Number one, overturning key regulations on fracking. On the last business day of the year, the Interior, this is quoting Chris Mooney, on the last business day of the year, the Interior Department rescinded a 2015 Obama administration rule that would have set new environmental limitations on hydraulic fracturing, or fracking, on public lands. It would have tightened standards for well construction and wastewater management, required the disclosure of the chemicals contained in fracking fluids, and probably driven up the cost for many fracking activities. We got to stop that. And so, yep, sure enough, they stopped that. Thank you, Arthur. Number two, weakening the rules that were designed to prevent another Deepwater Horizon spill. The agency also moved to water down the well control rule, which is intended to prevent the kind of blowout that killed 11 workers. This is the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement. Number three, declaring open season on migratory birds. On the Friday before Christmas, the Interior Department quietly rolled back an Obama-era policy aimed at protecting migratory birds by announcing that oil, gas, wind, and solar operators who accidentally kill birds will no longer be prosecuted. Number four, reinstating mining leases for Ivanka Trump's landlord. Yes, seriously. This is the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness of northern Minnesota. On the Friday before Christmas, the Interior Department moved to renew expired leases for copper and nickel mining operations on the border of the park, reversing an Obama decision. This directly benefits the Chilean mining firm owned by billionaire Andronico Luksic, who rents a 6-bedroom mansion to the first daughter and her husband, Jared Kushner, in the posh Kalorama neighborhood of Washington, D.C. Interesting. Number five, letting nursing hooks off the hook when their patients suffer in their care. The Trump administration reversing guidelines put into place under Obama is scaling back the use of fines against nursing homes that harm residents or place them in grave risk of injury. So if you run a nursing home and you want to, beat up your patients, or hey, the open season on old folks. Number six, civil servants may not get a bonus because the rich got a tax cut. The White House is now warning agencies to brace for even deeper cuts in the 2019 budget it'll announce early next year, part of an effort to lower the federal deficit to pay for the new tax law. Number seven, undercutting enforcement by waging a war of attrition against the bureaucracy. OSHA, for example, wave of recent retirements, has depleted the managerial staff of the agency's 70 field offices. It's been a 6% drop in personnel. The Chemical Safety Board, one of 19 small agencies, Trump has marked for elimination. We don't need no safety from chemicals. Number eight, reneging on a federal commitment to fund a major infrastructure project. Well, we'll see. He still says he's going to do it, but he's going to do it with money from the billionaires. So. Number nine, firing all the members of the Presidential Advisory Council on HIV/AIDS. He notified them by FedEx on Friday last week without warning. Number 10, maneuvering behind the scenes to sabotage the census. They want the census takers to start asking people to prove that they're citizens of the United States. which is going to cause a lot of people to say, you know, no to the census takers. I mean, I'm talking about citizens of the United States who may look Hispanic and have not gone through the trouble, you know, who are Hispanic genetically, but have, you know, are actual U.S. citizens. They were born in this country, their parents or their grandparents, whatever. But they may not have their citizenship documents around, or they don't have their passports or whatever. And I mean, you know, who wants to go through that, right? It's like the whole thing with voting. The Republicans now not only are trying to make it hard for you to vote, but in order to help their gerrymandering, they want to scare away Hispanics from and Asians from answering census questions so that they don't get counted, so that those particularly big cities where you see a lot of these folks, so you know, they have less representation in Congress. I mean, it's just bizarre. Anyhow, there's a great article in today's Washington Post. Rich in Greenwood, Indiana. Hey, Rich, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Happy New Year.
Thanks. Back at you.
You're welcome. I wanted to offer the idea that if the New Deal hadn't been generated, that we never would have, nationally, we never would have had the manufacturing capacity that we basically just flipped the switch on to be war production that allowed us to enter the war and by any measure be the energy that won the war.
Yeah. Hitler revived the German economy after World War I and after the big hit it took from the Treaty of Versailles by, number one, reneging on the Treaty of Versailles, but number two, massive internal infrastructure projects, just absolutely massive projects to build the Autobahn, build the Volkswagen. The Nazi regime invented the Volkswagen and built factories all over Germany to make it. Just cement factories, steel factories, concrete, everything.
And as you're talking about that idea of the 29 crash, it was this global impact. I mean, it wasn't just the U.S. market.
Right.
And when we added to that crash, and that crash happened globally, Germany was suddenly absolutely destabilized, giving a super push for the opportunity that Hitler stepped into.
Yeah, and it was kind of a twofer, because not only did Hitler have an opportunity to say no to the international order, essentially, which was in chaos because of the Republican Great Depression of 1929, but also that the Republican Great Crash of 29 it did go worldwide. You're absolutely right, and it hit the other countries of Europe, and it was one of the reasons. I've often wondered. Louise read Rise and Fall of the Third Reich when we lived in Germany. I read much of it, but not every single word of it. And her question, and my question for that matter, was, why did the French just roll over when the Germans came in? Well, we forget France was still recovering from World War I. And the Spanish flu and everything else. But number two, France was mired in the Great Depression. And a lot of French people thought, hey, look at the Germans. I mean, their economy is roaring hot. Germans are back to work. They're making higher salaries. They're making more money. Yeah, Hitler's a little bit of a crazy man. He's got a funny mustache. But what the heck? If he's going to improve life in France, we'll take it. Not all French people said that, obviously, but certainly the Vichy France did.
And something that's demographic about this that has only recently hit me as a wow. I look back to the rise and the actions of the Nazi Party, and I think about 1935 as this date, and think of a 13-year-old boy in 1935. In 1940, he's 18 years old, and he has been through 5 years of national indoctrination, and he is ready to be part of Waffen SS death squads and just start running rampant because Hitler told him so.
Yeah. Well, and the same thing was happening in Japan. You had the kamikaze pilots who were willing to die for the sun god, for the emperor. Hirohito, I think was his name at the time. So, yeah, I'm with you, Rich.
And so enculturation that I was never really, aware as this progressive over a multiple years indoctrination effect on, and where did these monsters come from? Well, they were grown.
Yeah.
And it took a little time.
Well, and
that's how it happened.
Yeah, and we've seen the same thing in the United States with Reaganomics and the demonization, the demonization of minorities.
Oh, it's an ugly truth.
Yeah, it really is. Rich, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Very well said. Ray in Miami. Hey, Ray, what's up?
Well, I'm listening and I'm enjoying what I'm hearing, but, you know, it always bothered me how Henry Kissinger could become the Secretary of State in the United States after World War II. He's a brown shirt Nazi, and
Kissinger?
Henry Kissinger, just check your history, was a brown shirt Nazi.
Henry Kissinger was a Jew who fled, whose family fled Germany in the 30s.
Check your history, and they've shown it on TV many times.
I mean, I think Henry Kissinger was a war criminal, but for what he did, you know, in Vietnam and in the Nixon administration, not for supporting Hitler. But
well, I can only repeat what I've seen on national history channels about the war and about who they were. They show pictures of him.
Yeah. Well, there's a really good documentary called The Trial of Henry Kissinger, which is, you know, makes a very, very strong case that Henry Kissinger should be tried for war crimes, for crimes against humanity.
Absolutely.
But I don't recall that it had anything to do with World War II or Adolf Hitler. I think it was, you know, entirely around, you know, what's going on with, or what was then going on with Vietnam, and his empowerment of Nixon. But was that your point?
That was.
You just want to kick Kissinger?
You know, not only that, no, not necessarily kicking, but to tell the truth about what's going on in America today.
Yeah. Well, that's always a useful thing. Ray, thank you for the call. Good to hear from you. We'll be right back. Happy New Year. It's our first show of the new year, and a lot on the plate. We'll get to it as we continue through the program. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Michigan has a new chemical crisis in their water. We'll talk about that as the day continues. Stick around. Welcome back. Let's see here, Patrick in Bangor, Maine. Hey, Patrick, what's on your mind?
Tom, good to hear your show. I'm listening to you online. You know, I was thinking when you talked about the voter suppression at in the book you're reading, the thing that I noticed, and if you remember that one of the first early hires of the Trump administration was Carl Icahn, that the whole Trump administration strategy reminds me of a hostile takeover in the corporate boardroom.
Yeah. Yeah, although Icahn was brought in as an advisor, not as a hire, right? Isn't he just kind of hanging out?
An advisor.
Yeah.
You know, he's the king of the takeover.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know. Look at what he did. It was Carl Icahn who did it to TWA, wasn't it? Or am I thinking of somebody else?
There's a couple of smaller companies too.
Yeah, Pan Am.
So would the voter suppression look like a dissident shareholder move to reduce the number of people who have something to say about what goes on?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that may be a useful metaphor to describe what's going on. That's fascinating. Let me ponder that a little bit, Patrick. Maybe it could be developed into a longer rant, but I think spot on. And voter suppression, basically gerrymandering and voter suppression, are the only reasons why Republicans are in control of the House, the Senate, the White House, and the Supreme Court. The only reasons. I know that there's a lot of other theories being floated, but these things were the ones that were seminal. They were, knocking hundreds of thousands of people off the voting rolls in Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, just before the election, so that Trump could get those states for the Electoral College, even though he lost the national popular vote by 3 million. And then the gerrymandering that causes, Pennsylvania, for example, I believe is sending 9 Republicans and 3 Democrats to the House of Representatives when more people voted for Democrats in the last election than for Republicans. And it's all because of gerrymandering. It's pretty astonishing. I'm with you, Patrick. Thank you for the call. Well said. Sandy in Denver, Colorado. Hey, Sandy, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Back at you.
I met you in Denver many years ago and hope you'll come back.
Oh, thank you. I hope to.
Yeah. My main reason for calling today is to get the word out that there is going to be a Women's March, the second year in a row, on January 20th. We're having it in Denver at 9:30 in the morning, and I know there's many other cities also having marches.
Yes.
And we want to express that we want this to be a positive march. Last year there were more negative signs, and this time we want to have positive messages going forward with what we want to see happen.
Right.
And
So
there are also T-shirts that you can purchase online.
I'm sorry?
There's also new T-shirts designed for the marches, at least here in Colorado. We have a website, marchoncolorado.org, and we also have a Facebook page.
And this is all to the Women's March on the 20th of this month?
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
And,
yeah. So what are the positive messages that you think are bubbling up? Obviously, you know, empower women,
right.
I would think.
So many women running everywhere.
Yes.
Being elected, it's wonderful.
Yeah. But what are some of the other, you know, strengthen Social Security and Medicare, universal, you know, health care, not warfare?
Yeah, I think those are some of them.
National single payer?
Come up with their own.
Yeah, yeah, there you go.
There's a big long list of things we need to be.
Well, there is a big long list. The Democratic Party really needs to get on the issue of boiling it down to 3 things that can be repeated over and over ad infinitum. It really works well. Sandy, thank you. Excellent points all. Thank you very much for the information. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and John in Gig Harbor, Washington. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
One thing, Tom. I think you get the biggest effect on President Trump by economically having the public be notified of all of his holdings and allow the public to boycott his businesses. And I think economically, if it was to affect him economically, I think he'd probably change his ways.
Well, you know, in a small way, that's happening with the Trump properties. His hotel in Washington, D.C. is making more money than they ever expected because you've got all these foreign dignitaries coming in and staying there and then going over to the White House to beg for things. And you know, that's pretty crass, but that's what's going on. But many Trump properties around the world are you know, not doing well right now because people just don't want to be associated with the Trump name. Who wants to live in a Trump tower anymore? Used to be a status symbol. Now it's like a political statement.
But he's probably got other businesses also that are probably money-making businesses that aren't necessarily property, that if they require consumption by a person, that people could avoid consuming any of his products or services.
Yeah.
In all his holdings. But the public has to know what they are.
Yeah, boycotts are tough, though. I mean, you know, it's like people trying to boycott, for example, the Koch brothers. The Koch brothers own all these different companies, you know, hundreds of companies, you know, Georgia Pacific, and then Georgia Pacific owns a bunch of brands, for example. Yeah. And it's really hard to figure out which brands are which, and then they change, and they swap them off, and they change names, and they put other holding companies in there. I have found that unless a boycott is singular, like the great boycott of the 1960s, has a charismatic leader like Cesar Chavez was leading it for the United Farm Workers, and has a strong moral component, which the great boycott did, it doesn't have any effect. And the great boycott actually didn't have much economic effect. The grape growers were not hurt by that boycott. Instead, what happened was they were shamed by that boycott. And they were shamed by it because it got a lot of publicity. And that's the thing. I don't think that you're going to find any television network that is willing to give publicity to any kind of boycott against Trump or Kochs or any of these guys.
They could be sued, but people can.
Well, it's not that they'd be sued. It's that they're relying. You know, the television networks get literally $1 billion every election year. You know, from that almost $1 billion just that the Koch network raised for 2016. Where did it go? Television advertising.
You also have the internet, which could spread the word around to people without even involving a television network.
Well, although that's getting harder and harder too. I mean, increasingly now the internet is, and particularly with the death of net neutrality, the internet is a bunch of little silos, a bunch of little, closed communities that are owned by people like Mark Zuckerberg or Google or whatever. And in these closed communities, you know, it's if you want to pay, you can get your message out. I mean, this is the big lesson of the last election, that people, you know, that these social media products are really great for people who have money and wealth and money and power, and they can use that money and power to deliver the memes that they want. But for the rest of us, You know, just doing a few likes on Facebook ain't going to make anything happen. So, but I understand what you're saying, John, and I
a few bucks in some of his businesses would make an economic effect on him, and millions of people could do that if they're disgruntled with Trump.
I just, you know, respectfully, I'd say dream on, John. I think that the most important thing we can do right now is get everybody registered to vote. Make sure that your voter registration is up to date. Keep in mind, in all the states that are Republican-controlled, they are knocking hundreds of thousands of voters off the rolls. You got a guy in the White House now who is in charge of this, Chris Kobach, his so-called Voter Fraud Commission, that they won't even let the Democrats know what they're talking about or what they're doing, because this has nothing to do with voter fraud. It has to do with preventing black people, brown people, older people, and young people from voting. It's just, that's the bottom line. Lucian in Glendale, Arizona. Hey, Lucian, what's up?
Well, I was just sitting around here thinking how beautiful it used to be on Medicare. I've been on it for 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
It would only go up 80 cents a year, $1 a year, and that. And then this year I get the paperwork, and it's up over $24.
Well,
I see nothing on the news and the newspapers and the magazines that they were going to raise Medicare $24.
Yeah.
Is this more of the Republican BS that's floating around?
I'm not sure, Lucian. I don't know. I don't know exactly why you saw that increase.
I don't know how it happened. Like I say, I've been on it for over 12 years. It only go up 80 cents or $1.
Well, medical expenses have been rising fairly radically recently, and you know, Trump's throwing a monkey wrench into Obamacare is providing more opportunities for price gouging and rip-offs by people in the healthcare industry. That may have something to do with it. But Lucian, let me get somebody on who really understands Medicare. We'll do an in-depth program on this in the next few weeks. Maybe get Alex back on or somebody like that,
good, Tom.
Or what's his name, the insurance executive? Yeah, Wendell Potter or somebody like that.
Don't they notify the people? You know, do you have to wait till it's payday?
I think you have to wait, but I'm not sure. Lucian, let me find out about that. Thanks a lot for the call. John in Minneapolis. Hey, John, what's up?
Yeah, I wanted to say I think we're going to have to develop, you know, moving forward, a very, very strong populist movement that can just trump all of the propaganda that is thrown back at us to divide us. And, you know, you see how divided often, you know, people on the other progressives can be sometimes, where they're like little silos. They go into one particular area, and then they don't look at the entire picture. And I think that Bernie Sanders really underscored that. We have to, you know, make connections with the whole thing. We can't just, you know, correct this little issue and that little issue, because it's just going to create a politics of failure. We're just going to fail.
Yeah, and this is why I was saying we need to settle on, or the Democratic Party needs to settle on, 3 big, substantial issues. And
I could name one of them, and I think that is very neglected, and that is working people across the board, black, white, women, the whole 9 yards. I mean, everybody suffers as a result of this economic system.
Yeah.
That should be number one. And, you know, healthcare, I think, is another one, number 2.
Medicare for all.
And, you know, I mean, it slips my mind, but I'm sure you can think of many.
Yep, we'll work on it. John, thanks for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com. For the Thom Hartmann University Book Club today, we're reading Locked Down, Locked Out, Why Prison Doesn't Work and How We Can Do Better by Maya Chenwar, who is, or was, I believe she still is, the publisher, or the editor, rather, over at truthout.org. This is from the introduction, the very beginning of the book. She uses a word I can't say on the air. I'll replace it with the word damn. Damn, 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 damn. I'm crying with my mother over the phone. It's late evening, December 25th, 2012, and Kayla, my only sister and best friend, has been arrested for the 7th time in the past 6 years. She's in jail again, and this time we're sort of hoping she'll stay there. If she asks, I tell Mom, I'm not bailing her out. Well, you know, we're not, Mom says, her voice low and far away, a weary echo of words uttered in months and years past. If she's in there, at least she'll be safe. Jail, we agree, may be the only place that can save Kayla's life, staving off her burning dependency on heroin. Neither of us acknowledges that regardless of whether Kayla stays clean while incarcerated, sooner or later she'll be getting out. Do we know what she's in for, I asked Mom. Does it matter? I think of Kayla cuffed and listless, being dragged through the doors of the Cook County Jail, catching the eyes of women she's known before in court, on the street, in juvenile detention, in jail, in prison. I wonder whether a part of her is relieved to be back. Later, when I pick up the phone and hear a robotic voice announce, you have a collect call from the Cook County Jail, press 5 to take the call, I press the hang-up button and get into bed. My attitude toward Kayla's incarceration was born out of desperation. She'd overdosed 3 times within 2 months, passing out on the street, awakening in abandoned buildings or crowded hospitals, her pulse barely ticking. Yet my wish chafed against not only my love for her, but also my politics, my ideals, my sense of justice and truth. After all, I run a social justice-based news organization and have denounced the colossus that is the prison industrial complex for as long as I can remember. For nearly a decade, I've corresponded with a number of people in prison as both interviewees and pen pals, and I've learned much from them about the violence and hopelessness of our system. My understandings of the power structures that create prisons have been guided by the work of people like activist and scholar Angela Davis, a staunch prison abolitionist. How could I reconcile my wholehearted opposition to the prison industrial complex with a desire to see my own sister locked up? When I look back on that time, I can only comprehend it by acknowledging the insidious, persistent role that prison occupied in my mind. It was closely connected to the role it occupies in larger society. Incarceration serves as the default answer to many of the worst social problems plaguing this country. Not because it solves them, but because it buries them. By isolating and disappearing millions of Americans, more than 2.3 million right now, making us the most incarcerated country on the planet, prison conveniently disappears deeply rooted issues that society, or rather those with power in society, would rather not attend to. Prison, writes Angela Davis, performs a feat of magic. As massive numbers of homeless, hungry, unemployed, drug-addicted, illiterate, and mentally ill people vanish behind its walls, the social problems of extreme poverty, homelessness, hunger, unemployment, drug addiction, illiteracy, and mental illness become more ignorable, too. But, as Davis notes, prisons do not disappear problems, they disappear human beings. And the caging and erasure of those human beings, mostly people of color and poor people, perpetuates a cycle in which large groups of people are cut off from mainstream society and denied the freedoms, opportunities, civil dignity, and basic needs that allow them a good life. In many jails and prisons, incarcerated people are tossed into a dank, dungeon-like solitary confinement cell when they are determined to have misbehaved. It's dubbed the hole. Isolated and dark, it shuts out almost all communication with fellow prisoners in the outside. Guards control the terms of confinement and the channels, if any, by which words can travel in and out. The whole presents a stark symbol of the institution of prison in its entirety, which functions on the tenets of disappearance, isolationism, and disposability. The solution to our social problems, the mechanism that's supposed to keep things together, amounts to destruction, the disposal of vast numbers of human beings, the breaking down of families, and the shattering of communities. Prison is tearing society apart. This country's most marginalized communities bear the overwhelming brunt of that devastation, but ultimately we are all caught up in the destruction as the politics of isolation ruptures the human bonds that could otherwise hold together a safer, healthier, and more just society. The behemoth that encompasses the prison is called by many names. The most meaningful ones, I think, are those that convey the pervasiveness of its power, the way it infects the world outside as well as the people within. Scholar and activist Beth Ritchie uses the term prison nation, describing it as, quote, a broad notion of using the arm of the law to control people, especially people who are disadvantaged and come from disadvantaged communities, end quote. That control can take the form of prisons, jails, surveillance, policing, detention, probation, harsh restrictions on child guardianship, the militarization of schools, and other strategies of isolation and disposal, particularly deployed against poor communities of color, especially black communities. Others have used prison nation simply to demonstrate the system's vastness, how it infiltrates our culture and fuels our national politics, often in invisible ways. Prison industrial complex, PIC, is another key term. Rachel Herzing of the prison abolitionist group Critical Resistance defines it, and then she goes on through this. It's an extraordinary book, Locked Down, Locked Out by Maya Shen. Low-growth countries.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and I've got an article. In fact, let me just check and make sure it's still there. It went up on Alternet over the weekend, and it slowly over the last 2 days has worked its way down to the very bottom of the page. Yeah, it's at the very bottom of the page. How the GOP tax cut will also shrink your paycheck. And the point that I make in this article is twofold. The first is that there is a market for labor, and the market for labor is entirely based on after-tax income, and every employer in America knows that. So when workers' after-tax income goes up as a result of a tax cut, then the employers tend over time to dial back the amount of gross wages they're offering, because they know that with a tax cut, the net wages, the money that people are taking home, has gone up, and they're willing to work for less than that. That's the labor market, is the fancy way of saying what people are willing to work for. So number one, when you have a tax cut, it doesn't affect people at the top. They just take more money because they have more control over their income. But working people will, over time, see a wage cut as well. And this is well established from 50 years or more, hundreds of years of economics. You can just look at the trends. And number two, that if you get a little extra money this year as a result of a tax cut, instead of a wage increase, that means that your contributions to Social Security are not going up, even though you have a, quote, raise, which means that when you retire, your retirement will be poorer. I see these things as bad things. I'm curious what Julio Rivera thinks about it. Julio's with us. He is the editorial director of Reactionary Times, a columnist for Newsmax, right-wing news and politics. RevolutionaryTimes.com is the website. You can tweet him at, oh yeah, it's Julio. Julio, welcome back.
Well, happy 2018, Tom.
Indeed. Happy New Year to you, Julio, and to your family. Okay, and I hope that, by the way, we talked a while ago. You came in from Puerto Rico. How is your family doing down there? Do they have electricity or water yet?
No. You know what? The tragedy and the suffering and the pain continues. I actually have a article that ran for the first time, an opinion piece on the Washington Times that ran today kind of going after PREPA for a lot of their abuses, especially in relation to a very favorable, as we're talking about taxes, a tax situation that exists there for people who want to import business to Puerto Rico, which no one's been able to take advantage of because obviously of the state there with the infrastructure, and it's just one of the great tragedies of our time.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't lay all the blame on PREPA, but I agree it's one of the great tragedies of our time. So the question, basically, is you know, if a Republican tax cut to working class people means that over time working class wages are going to go down, why is it that most working people don't realize this?
Well, you're doing it under the assumption that those wages are going to go down. Now, David Ricardo, who is the economist that you cited in his theory there, as far as what he felt the effects of a tax cut would be for actual wages, is disputable. I mean, Adam Smith didn't necessarily agree with that theory. But the one thing I will say is this, though, Tom, look at the actual results. Ever since the tax cut was announced, several large, United States employers have actually given bonuses to employees.
Right, but none of them have announced a wage increase. No, hang on just a second.
I don't understand how you see that you automatically assume that wages are going to go down because of this.
Well, no American employers have announced a wage increase. None. Zero.
So is a bonus not a wage increase?
No, it's not. It's a bonus.
How is that not a wage increase if you're getting
a one-time bonus?
You didn't expect.
It's a one-time bonus. It's not a wage increase. A wage increase is your base salary. AT&T announced that they were going to give 100,000 or maybe 200,000 people $1,000, and they were going to lay off a bunch of people. But every other major employer in the United States, including AT&T, has announced that they're going to use the vast majority of this money that they're getting from the corporate tax cut in order to buy back buy back shares, which artificially inflates the price of a stock. It doesn't change the value of it, but the price of it goes up. And they're doing this because
what does that have to do with wages, though? So we're talking here directly about
they're
wages.
Doing this because they pay their senior executives.
United States employers have announced that they're lowering wages. Where's this idea coming from, Tom?
We have seen, Julio, have you never seen the famous graphic, it's floating around all over the internet, of wage increases starting in, say, any time you want in the early 20th century, although World War I and World War II and the Great Depression and all were kind of disruptive. But if you start at 1940 to today, what you see is that wages and productivity both went up together at a fairly healthy annual clip from 1940 to 1980. And then in the 80s, they diverged. And productivity continued to rise. And, of course, productivity tracks corporate profits. And wages flattened out. Wages flattened out because of the Reagan tax cuts.
Well, I try not to get my economic, data from memes or graphics or whatever it is that you're
you can find this from the Treasury Department.
You know what hurts wages? When taxes go up. Okay, because then the people have less money to actually take home. Social Security, which you cited when you were kind of building up to this, how is that affected in any way, shape, or form? The Social Security taxes haven't been changed as part of this tax cut.
When taxes go up, and I refer you, Julio, to the tax increases of 1937, 1939, 1942. There was another one in the 40s. I forget what year. There were a couple in the 50s. When taxes go up on working people, wages go up because their take-home pay has been cut and they can't live on that lower take-home pay, so their employers are forced to increase their wages. When taxes go up on working people, wages go up. No, not by my theory, by actual empirical data.
Okay. Well, listen, by your
name a time when wages went up. No, hang on just a second, Julio. If you could just name any era in American history where taxes on working people went up and wages went down. You won't find it. What you'll find is that whenever taxes on working people go up, wages go up at about the same rate, maybe even a little faster. And whenever taxes go down on working people, over time, wages go down. And we have seen that writ large ever since 1980 with the Reagan tax cuts.
Well, I'm sure that there is some data that supports that, but at the same time, what's going to be our reliance now? Is the working class going to say, oh, government, please raise our taxes in hopes that perhaps our wages will rise? That's like shooting yourself in the foot. It doesn't really make any sense. Listen, ultimately, but in concert with the actual taxes, individual brackets going down slightly, which is really, there's only really a slight decrease in the individual brackets. The fact that the corporate tax is going to go down, we already saw what the effect was, whether you want to give it credit or not. It did spur businesses to go out and give bonuses. It's also going to give confidence to corporations to go ahead and increase hiring now that they know that, 14%, to go from 35% to 21% is a big boom for these businesses. They will invest more into actual labor. And just in the deregulatory measures that the president's taken in year one, we've seen 1.7 million new jobs be created.
Yeah, the Obama boom is continuing.
Levels
I get it. The Obama boom is continuing.
The taxes going down.
No, the Obama boom is continuing. It's a straight line. If you look from 2008 to today, the economy has gotten not much better, not much worse. If that line it's just been a straight line, Julio. I get it. But my point is, just let me please let me make my point, if I may.
Less money under Obama than they actually did even under Bush, and now that's a fact that we can cite.
The point that I'm making, Julio, is that if in Denmark. In Denmark, right? McDonald's is an entry-level job. It pays around $20,000, $25,000 a year. But they actually pay their workers $45,000 a year because $20,000 of that is going to go to taxes. What is that? So in Denmark, basically, McDonald's workers are taking home, at the end of the day, the same take-home pay that they do in the United States, a little bit higher. But the added money that goes to the added taxes gives all of those workers at McDonald's in Denmark free health care,
give it all to the government. Just
free college all the way through a PhD, some of the best police and the best schools in the world. Seems like a fair trade-off to me. You don't want it?
Oh, wow. No, okay. I don't believe it does either.
All right, Julio Rivera, reactionarytimes.com. Oh, yeah, Twitter. Oh, yeah, it's Julio. Thank you, Julio.
Thank you so much, Tom. Have a happy New Year.
You too.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back in just a minute. And welcome back. Charles in Southgate, California. Hey, Charles, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Well, I was just thinking about the normalization of the Trump presidency. I mean, it seems like, the longer he stays in office, people are becoming, more acceptable to what's going on.
Yeah.
And they're going to sleep again.
I think you're right. And it's like we've ceased to be shocked or outraged, or not ceased, but it's been muted. I saw him
holding his wife's hand the other day, and I usually don't pay any attention to that, but I just, it's like so untypical of him. And him flashing out against Amazon.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like, he's hitting mainstream really big time.
He is a one-man rage machine. It seems like, what Trump is all about all the time is just being outraged about something. And that, of course, fits perfectly with Fox News, which that's their currency is outrage. But, yeah, I think you're right, Charles. And the normalization of the Trump presidency is something that should concern us all. Thank you for the call. Very well said. Dan in Kansas City, Kansas. Hey, Dan, what's up?
Hey, I had a couple things to say. One thing about this guy, it's amazing. He's from Puerto Rico. He's Hispanic, and he's defending Trump's policies and the conservative views. I mean, of course, people made lower wage under Obama than Bush because everybody that made good jobs under Bush and made good wages lost their jobs, lost their homes, lost their cars, and they went to work for lower paying jobs.
Right, as a result of the Republican deregulation.
Yeah, and then they cite that as some kind of statistic that supports their views, And then here's another thing I saw on the news, and it never gets contested. It's like the news reporters are asleep. That this guy saying, well, Trump made a campaign promise to build that wall. And unless we get the money to build that wall, we're not going to fund the government. Well, his campaign promise actually was he was going to build a wall and Mexico was going to pay for it.
Right.
So when did that campaign promise go from Mexico's going to pay for it to the taxpayers going to pay for it?
Well, he's modified that a few times. He's like, we're going to impose tariffs, and we'll take the money out of that to pay for it if they're not going to actually write a check to us. Quack, quack, quack. It's all face-saving stuff. But the sad tragedy here, Dan, is that he can do these essentially demagogue rants. You know, these strongman, you know, Duterte, you know, type of rants, and there's a certain segment of the American populace, you know, I'm guessing probably maybe 10, 15, maybe as much as 20% of Americans who are, you know, authoritarian followers who are like, oh yeah, we need a strong man, I'm a tough guy, yeah. When in fact, he's not really a strong man. He just, you know, he talks tough, but he's not, it's not smart tough. It's stupid tough. It's schoolyard bully tough. It's the kind of tough that, you know, if you're negotiating a hotel or a casino, and Dan, thanks for the call. If you're negotiating a hotel or a casino or something like that, and you bluff and you fight, and in the end you lose the hotel or casino. Trump did that multiple times, right? How many times did he go bankrupt? But if you're doing the exact same strategy with Kim Jong-un or with Vladimir Putin, you might end up with a nuclear war. Not so wise. We'll be back. Welcome back. Barbara in Sequim, am I saying that right, Washington? Sequim?
Yeah, like there's no E in it.
Okay, Sequim, okay.
I wanted to talk about the fellow that called before the hour about his Medicare premium going up.
Right.
It was in the news, kind of buried, not in mainstream. The Medicare premium has been $134 for most people for the last 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. But because of the hold harmless, not letting your net Social Security go down, a lot of people haven't been paying that. Myself, my sisters, my husband, my friends, a lot of us. So this year, because we got the 2% increase in Social Security, they were able to make up what we have not been paying, up to $134. So, you know, with one hand they giveth and the other is taken away. But what I would like to see with this being done, the Medicare fund is going to be taking in a lot of money in 2018 from those of us who have gone from paying a lesser amount up to the $134. That's going to be a considerable amount of money. I'd like to hear that when they want to
well, wasn't that
reform in, pardon?
Barbara, wasn't that same money going into Medicare? It just was being deducted from your Social Security?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. If you didn't, if your net Social Security couldn't support that premium of $134 during the years when the COLA was little or nothing, you know, 2 or 3 years when they didn't have it, and we didn't receive a raise, it's just been, well, I'll use real numbers. My premium should have been $134. I was paying $111. My husband was paying $109. Different things.
So you're getting basically a discount for having a low level of Social Security income.
No, it's because they couldn't lower the net of your Social Security by the Medicare premium Part B.
Right.
Until now, when they gave us the 2%, I'm up to 134, and my husband and everybody. But our net increase in our Social Security check is like $2. So basically, it's the same.
Okay, I get it. So the Social Security, the Social Security cost of living adjustment is simply funding essentially Medicare for many people, for people who are on the low end of Social Security disbursements.
No, that's not exactly it. It's to make up for the fact that the last 2 or 3 years we haven't been able to pay the full $134.
I see. Okay. Barbara, thank you. Thank you for educating me.
He'll explain this way better than I can. I'm anxious to have him on.
Yeah.
If I have another second, another thing, with this doubling the standard deductions, those of us over 65 have been getting a built-in increase in that standard deduction anyway. And if they don't include that built-in over the $12,000 a person, we won't be getting any more tax credit for that either. But he can explain that.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. Barbara, thank you. Thank you for the information. Corky in Hilton, New York. Hey, Corky, what's up?
Yeah, I can't tolerate these people that don't understand civics.
For example?
The first year of the old president, the first year of the new president is a result of the last year of the old president's policies. It takes a long time to turn this big ship around.
Well, not only that, we were operating until October on the Obama budget. Arguably, we still are, because a new budget hasn't been passed, just a continuing resolution. So you're right.
Yeah, this guy went to Hogwarts School of Business.
No, I think Hogwarts is better than that.
Huh?
I think Hogwarts graduates actually.
I know it was substandard, just like his Trump University.
I think he went to Trump University. No, let's not pick on Julio. He's not here to defend himself, and I don't want to make, I don't want to slam him or make fun of him.
You don't have to be here to listen. He can listen on the radio like I have to listen to his stuff.
Yeah, but I don't pick on you when you're not here to take, to talk back to me either, Corky. It's just not fair. It's not reasonable.
Be my guest. Everybody else does.
Okay. Corky, thanks a lot for the call. It's great talking with you. Good talking to you. John in Chicago. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. How are you? I've never talked to you before.
Well, thank you for calling. Thanks for listening to WCPT. What's up? What's up?
So, a couple of things. One is I here live in Illinois, and I'm a very small business owner, small proprietor, do maybe $300,000 a year in sales. If I'm lucky, I can get maybe $70,000 out of that for myself when it's all done and said.
That's great.
And I did talk to my accountant today. I finally got a chance to talk to him after he got a chance to look at the new tax bill and what's coming ahead for at least me. I wasn't concerned about everybody else. And he's saying to me that this is a great thing, that this bill is going to be an excellent thing for me, that I'm going to end up saving literally thousands of dollars over the next years if I continue on at the pace that I'm going, and if I raise it up even a little bit in sales and get my income up to maybe $80,000-$90,000, it's even going to be better for me.
Yeah, same here.
Go ahead.
No, same here, John. If what I'm understanding, I haven't had a conversation with my accountant yet, but from what I'm reading and what I'm understanding, because I own my own business here, this radio show, and it is a pass-through corporation essentially, I'm going to get a 20% tax cut at a certain amount in a certain area. But the question for you and me, John, is, we're doing okay, right? We're not making $10,000 a year. We're doing okay. But our tax cut is coming at the expense of 12, 13, 14 million people losing their health insurance. It's coming at the expense of environmental regulations that protect our children from getting cancer and brain damage. It's coming at the cost of our national parks being raped. It's coming at the cost of our military machine increasing in size and increasing in a way that is destabilizing, in my opinion, the world rather than stabilizing it. And I believe that and it's coming at the cost of the destruction of many of our social safety net programs because it sets up the destruction of both Social Security and Medicare. And I just think the price is too high. I'm perfectly willing to pay the taxes. I don't need an extra $10,000 a year, John. And even if I did, I'd rather have it under more appropriate circumstances. That's my take on it. John, thanks for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of your calls right after this.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Meat Racket, The Secret Takeover of America's Food Business by Christopher Leonard. This is from the prologue. It's titled The Hidden King. Nobody ever visits the stranded little community of Waldron, Arkansas. But even if they did, a tourist would never see the place for what it really is. Most outsiders would be fooled into thinking it was an actual small town. On any given morning, the residents awaken and begin their routine along Main Street. Old men park their pickup trucks by the curb in front of the Rock Cafe, which opens early for breakfast. As the cafe's booths and tables fill up, a congregation of old-timers in cowboy hats gathers in a loose ring of aluminum chairs out front, smoking and talking and stubbing out their cigarette butts in a bucket full of sand. Later in the morning, Chambers Bank in the south end of town opens up, and the tellers cheerfully greet customers by name. On Thursday at noon, the livestock auction opens in a cavernous barn on the north side of town, drawing crowds of ranchers who haul steel trailers behind their trucks, with cows staring out between the horizontal slats. In the late afternoon, teenagers park their cars by the gazebo south of the auction barn, proudly displaying their Mustangs and Broncos like big game trophies. These events have a rhythm of their own, the clockwork functioning of a small-town economy. But it's all just window dressing. All of it would cease to exist in a moment and have no impact whatsoever on the true Waldron or its true economic reason for being. The real tempo of the town's economic pulse is measured by the coming and going of semi-trucks that roll down Main Street at periodic intervals, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In the middle of the night, tanker trucks full of animal feed rumble past the empty stores and out onto country roads that lead into the hilly terrain that surrounds town. At dawn, other trucks trundle in from the hills, heaped high with battered metal crates full of chickens that exude clouds of white feathers along the highway. The tempo can be measured in the regular arrival of train cars full of grain and oil seeds that dump their loads at a feed mill that clanks and hums and churns all night. And in the parade of refrigerated trucks that pull up to a slaughterhouse near the feed mill and get loaded with pallets of frozen meat. This is the real functioning of Waldron, Arkansas, and its true reason for being. This is the heartbeat of Tyson Foods, the nation's biggest meat company. The Tyson plant on the north end of Waldron is the only thing that keeps the town on the map. Appropriately, many residents simply refer to it as the complex. That's because the Tyson plant isn't just a factory, it's more like an entire small-town economy consolidated into one property. The complex contains its own feed mill and hatchery, its own trucking line and slaughterhouse that covers several acres of land and processes about 1 million dead chickens a week. The complex is like an economic dark star that has drawn into itself all the independent businesses, an economic dark star that has drawn into itself all the independent businesses that used to define a small town like Waldron, the kinds of businesses that were once the economic pillars of rural America. Of course, tourists to Waldron would never see the Tyson plant, and not just because it sits on the north fringe of town away from Main Street. Visitors are stopped at its front gate and forbidden from exploring its grounds. So a tourist would have to be content to stroll along the sidewalks downtown, observing the fake Main Street, the deceptive array of little businesses that make it seem like a community. This illusory appearance cloaks Tyson's existence all the way from its roots in rural America to the grocery store shelves and restaurant menus where its products finally reach American consumers. The average shopper is usually fooled when he or she peruses the meat aisle, seeing what appears to be an abundance of choices and products. Tyson brand name wouldn't necessarily stand out with its logo gracing just a handful of products. But the rotisserie chicken slowly turning in its oven, the Bonisi brand pepperoni, the Lady Astor brand chicken cordon bleu, the frozen chicken pot pie, and the Wright brand bacon all come from the same company, Tyson. And then there is all the unlabeled meat that Tyson floods into the U.S. food system every day. The meat served in cafeterias, nursing homes, fast food restaurants, and suburban eateries where more and more Americans eat their meals. There's a very good chance any of the meat purchased in these places was made by Tyson. Even if Tyson did not produce a given piece of meat, the consumer is really only picking between different versions of the same commodified beef, chicken, and pork that is produced throughout a system that Tyson pioneered. Tyson's few competitors have resorted to imitating the company's business model just to survive. This book aims to explore the vast hidden territory between the remote farms and towns like Waldron, where Tyson raises millions of animals, and the final point of contact where consumers buy the company's meat. Unseen between these two poles is a hidden power structure that has quietly reshaped U.S. rural economies while gaining unprecedented control over the nation's meat supply. Just a handful of companies produce nearly all the meat consumed in the United States, and Tyson is the king among them. The company sits atop a powerful oligarchy of corporations that determines how animals are raised, how much farmers get paid, and how meat is processed, all while reaping massive profits and remaining almost entirely opaque to the consumer. Because Tyson and its imitators are based in the geographic and economic fringes of America in forgotten places like Waldron, the company has managed to escape the scrutiny it deserves. While Tyson's operations are remote, the company's business practices affect virtually everyone. About 95% of Americans eat chicken, which means they almost certainly eat chicken produced by Tyson. And then it goes on from there. The book is The Meat Racket, The Secret Takeover of America's Food Industry by Christopher Leonard.
Hartmann.com/podcast. They're commercial free, and you can listen anytime, any place you want.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. News story just coming out. There was a cop killing, the killing of a police officer over the weekend, New Year's Eve, actually. This was in Colorado. And the guy who shot, his name is Matthew. He allegedly shot and killed 29-year-old Zachary Parrish, a police officer, early Sunday morning. And then he also shot and injured 4 other police officers before a SWAT team eventually killed him. This from Luke Barnes over at thinkprogress.org. Following the shooting, Luke writes, far-right extremism expert J.J. McNabb discovered Real's since-deleted Facebook page, which was littered with Pepe the Frog memes, Islamophobic posts, and other phrases used by the far right, including references to cuckoldry and rape culture. He also pictured one photo at a tactical training center with an AR-15 style weapon. The center has confirmed that he took a course there over the summer. And this is one of a number of right-wing extremists who have gone out and killed police. In 2009, Richard Andrew Poplowski, who frequently posted on the neo-Nazi website Stormfront, killed 3 police officers in Pittsburgh with an AK-47 after ambushing them. In 2014, Jared and Amanda Miller killed 2 officers in Las Vegas in what was described as a politically motivated ambush. Jared had previously posted support for right-wing militias and white supremacists on both Facebook and YouTube. In September, the FBI revealed that it has over 1,000 domestic terrorism investigations going on. In May, the FBI Homeland Security Bulletin warned that, quote from the FBI, small cells within the white supremacist extremist movement will likely continue to pose a lethal threat of violence over the next year. Yeah. Lethal would be an understatement. Tony in Stafford, Virginia, because, white right-wing extremists have killed more people than Muslim extremists in the United States, something that only rarely bleeds through into the corporate media. Tony, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, it's about Julio. You were talking to him, and he was talking about bonuses.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, a lot of companies this time of year hand out Christmas bonuses.
Well, it used to be fairly common. Now it's a much smaller minority of companies. I think the last article I saw, which was maybe a year or two ago in the business section of the New York Times, as I recall, was that, pre-1980, it was around 60–70% of companies did annual bonuses, and now it's down in the neighborhood of 10 to 20%. I could be remembering wrong, but I think it's in that neighborhood.
Yeah, well, they're still handing out bonuses, and if they're saying, well, this company's handing out a Christmas bonus or something, they're publicizing something that's probably always been happening.
Well, I believe,
even though it's a smaller number.
Yeah, I believe those AT&T bonuses were actually negotiated with the union last year, but I could be wrong on that. I know that some of the bonuses that Trump was claiming credit for were previously negotiated by union contracts. But the point is that no company, zero, and I read this morning in the Financial Times, no company in America has committed to actual wage increases. There's a couple of companies that gave bonuses to give publicity to Trump. AT&T was the biggest one, and of course AT&T is trying to suck up to Trump furiously right now because they want to merge with Time Warner, and Trump is suing to stop that from happening because he's upset about CNN.
What makes me mad about this new tax plan, it's on the backs of the middle class, the poor, the sick, because insurance rates are going to go up next year again. I've already got one for my Part B insurance of going up to about $50 this year, and next year it's going to go up probably about another $50, I guess. I got a COLA and half of it's gone on account of insurance increase.
Yep. Yep. And this is all because the health insurance industry in the United States is insanely profitable, and there are very few regulations on it, and Trump is committed to destroying regulations, also known as consumer protections. So it's just going to get worse until we get somebody in who actually believes that government can act on behalf of the people that put it into place and that control the power. Tony, excellent points. Thanks for the call. Bob in Schaumburg, Illinois. Hey, Bob, what's up?
Hey, Tom, hold on. I'm taking you off speaker.
Thank you.
First of all, Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
I was also wanted to comment about Julio's bonus, comment. I'm in sales, and a bonus to me is a gift. Is a earned gift for performance.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of going back to my salary. Is the bonus is not a guarantee. It's not part of nor is expected as part of my salary.
Right.
So it all goes back to either A, the company did well, or B, I did well within the company.
Right.
So it should never be considered part of the salary. And since I'm in Illinois too, and going back to John's comment about the fact that he was saving money, based on what his accountant had told him. So the next question becomes, so does that mean that John makes more money now because he saved money on his taxes? Or is he going to use that money to plow back into his business and pay his employees more or expand his business? Because for the most part, I get the feeling that if he's only earning $70,000 right now, he just gave himself a raise by saving the monies on his tax.
Well, I think that's essentially what he said. He was going to take an additional $10,000 or $20,000.
Yeah.
And
so how does that benefit anybody other than himself? And
then that's my point. And the clever thing that they did with this was included enough people in essentially the upper middle class. I'd say probably John and I and a lot of people are in the upper middle class. People who are making more than $50,000 and less than a couple $100,000 a year, and or certainly less than $400,000 puts you in the top 3%, I think, or maybe it's the top 1%. But people making 100 or less, and that group of people was given basically a bunch of bonuses by Trump, doing away with the alternative minimum tax. The alternative minimum tax typically hits hardest people who are making over 100 and less than 300,000 or 400,000, or actually up into the millions, because Trump got hit with that. He paid $24 million in ATM or AMT, AMT, back in 2005, the 1 year I think that we have his tax returns for. So yeah, good points all, Bob. Good points all. Thank you for the call. Leroy in Lake Forest, California. Hey, Leroy, what's up? Leroy? You got to listen to your phone, not your TV or radio. Harold in Fall Creek, Oregon. Hey, Harold, what's on your mind?
Hello, Tom. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year, Harold.
First of all, my heart goes out to the slain officers. It's a terrible sociological situation we find ourselves in.
It is.
But that's not my question. My question is why are we not demanding truth in politics? And why can't we do a legislative bill that demands truth in politics? And when people don't tell the truth, they get censored by the Ethics Committee, or censored by Congress, investigated by the Ethics Committee. And after so many censures, they have to leave office. Why can't we do that?
Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, over and over and over again, I mean, like 20, 30 times in the last 200 years, the Supreme Court has ruled that of all the free speech protections, of all the various types of free speech that are protected by the First Amendment, the most protected form of free speech, which includes the freedom to lie, is political free speech, number one. So you're going to have a real high bar to meet, if you do that. But number two, there's the problem of, in politics in particular, when it comes to things like predicting the outcome of policies, whether it's economic or whether it's sociological changes, it's really hard to define exactly what the truth is. I mean, you've got people saying, oh, if you cut taxes, it helps people. You got people saying, if you raise taxes, it helps people. They both have evidence for their points of view. I mean, who becomes, this is the big issue, Harold, who becomes the arbiter of what's true and what's not? If we were to pass a law that said that as part of the news media or as part of the media, I could be sued or even prosecuted for telling untruths, or if a politician could be sued or prosecuted for telling untruths on the air. What happens when the guy enforcing that law is Donald Trump?
Yeah, I hear you. It's just unfortunate, you know, on Facebook and other social media, you hear a lot about how the folks who voted for Trump are idiots and ignorant and so forth and so on, which I don't buy into. I don't want to get negative with folks who disagree with me.
Sure.
But they're believing the lies.
Yes.
And therefore, they're operating from a position of their truth, their personal truth, when in fact they're listening to lies.
Well, and it's not just Donald Trump's lies. About half, I think the number I saw this morning was 43 or 47% of all Republicans who support Donald Trump get virtually all of their news from Fox News and or right-wing hate radio. That's it. They don't look at any other sources. And
exactly.
You know, and what I've found is that people who live in that media ecosystem, you know, the people who have a steady diet, a daily diet, and an exclusive diet of right-wing propaganda through Fox News and through right-wing hate radio, they're true believers. I mean, they're completely. It's like talking to somebody from, you know, from North Korea, you know, trying to criticize dear leader. You know, it ain't going to happen.
Yeah,
And
well, it's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate that we have to deal with these lies on a daily basis.
I agree.
It's so much nicer if we could just understand what the truth is and be able to make our decisions based on the truth.
Yeah, and that's why we all need to be, you know, out there talking to people, and you know why I'm continuing to do this program, and so many of us are getting active and involved, because you know we've had enough of it. I mean, you know, Trump is online to have told 2,000 lies in the first year of his presidency, which wraps up on January 20th. We'll see if he hits that milestone, but that's a terrible, terrible number. Harold, thank you for the call. Good to hear from you. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We're going to check in with Luke Vargas to talk media news in a few minutes. We'll be back with more of your calls and more of the news of the day right after this. And welcome back. Hartmut in Kennesaw, Georgia. You are on the air.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello, Tom. I just wanted to weigh in on the question of World War II and the United States' role in the Pearl Harbor attack. There's a wonderful book that's, if you haven't read it, I strongly recommend it. It's by David Swanson, and the name of it is The War is a Lie.
Yeah, no, it's just simply War is a Lie. And I've read David Swanson's book. In fact, that book was one of maybe 5 or 6 books in my life that caused me to, at a very, very deep level, recalibrate my understandings of reality. David Swanson's book, War is a Lie, is a brilliant analysis of all, you know, I believe all the wars the United States has been involved in and why virtually every one of them was completely unnecessary.
Exactly. Well, all right. Well, so you have.
I've read the book. I've had David on the program.
That war.
Yeah, I know David. He's a good guy.
The same way that if you want to draw a parallel, I would say the actions of the Trump administration, like having exercises right off the coast. I mean, within sight of North Korea. That's exactly what we were doing to the Japanese before we cut off their oil and their scrap metal. Right. So then naturally they said, well, okay, we'll never be in better shape than now. The only other thing I wanted to say about that is that you say that it's fundamentally changed your way of looking at these wars, and it strikes me that we're the left in general, not just you, and I mean I'm pretty much, a lot of the left anyway, is refusing to have a close look at the Bush administration's war against Iraq. I would say that the evidence is much better for that war that we have basically sat back and let it happen because it served the interests of people in power. The evidence for that is much better than what you'll find written about World War II by David Swanson. So if you like David Swanson, I suggest you look at the countless arguments, and much of which you know. I mean, there's so much circumstantial evidence. You know, the insistence that there not be a commission that to look at the causes, and then to have that book, that report be a total farce in that it only talks about the moment when the planes hit the towers, not what actually happened to the towers, and so on and so forth. It goes on and on and on. I would say there are at least 1,000 good reasons, or well, maybe not 1,000, but hundreds of good reasons for doubting the story, which we continue to buy into. That's enough said by me. So thank you.
You're talking 9/11 now.
I'm talking about 9/11, yeah.
Yeah, and well, you know, regardless of your opinion of exactly what happened on 9/11, the reality is that bin Laden, in all probability, would not have organized the 9/11 attack if George Herbert Walker Bush had not gone back on April Gillespie's assurance to Saddam Hussein that he could invade Kuwait and had his little war, and in the process of doing so set up an Air Force base in Saudi Arabia, which was the thing that bin Laden said was what caused him to be so upset with the United States. Anyhow, Hartmann, thanks for the call. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It is time for us to check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do. And on the line with us is the senior foreign correspondent for Talk Media News, Luke Vargas. Luke, welcome back.
Hey, Tom. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too, sir. I saw the tweet this morning that Trump sent out about Pakistan. They've called in our ambassador. I'm assuming that meeting has already happened.
That was yesterday, yes.
Yeah, they're very upset about this. What is going on? I mean, my first thought was Trump is channeling, you know, Netanyahu and what's the new prince's name? Something bin Salman, or Salman?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, whatever.
Mohammed bin Salman.
Mohammed bin Salman. Thank you. That he was channeling these two right wingers, MBS and Netanyahu, but maybe I'm completely wrong. What is going on here?
Well, you can also add in that Trump's sort of inner foreign policy team appears to have been quite swayed by India's
Modi. Yeah, he's got
blame on Pakistan for unrest in Afghanistan in particular.
Well, and Modi is like, you know, he's like what's the Duterte in the Philippines. He's a right-wing, hardline, strongman populist, pseudo-populist. You know, he's
right.
The Trump of India essentially. Only he's a Hindu nationalist.
Yeah, so, you know, let's just back up for a second. So, I mean, what President Trump said in this tweet was that, you know, the U.S. has given Pakistan, you know, $40-odd billion worth of economic assistance over the past decade and a half. And all we get in return is lies and deceit, and the Pakistani government keeps supporting terror groups. And there's, you know, a long paper trail to back that up. You know, the Haqqani network has been given quite a lot of support by, you know, Pakistani intelligence, and they have been, at best, a partner in the fight on terrorism that drags their feet and tries to claim a lot of credit whenever they do anything, small or large. And you know, we saw the Trump administration in August release a big review of the U.S. policy in Afghanistan. And as you go through that document, you saw that the U.S. was really centrally pinning blame on a lot of the instability there on Pakistan. And so this is sort of a follow-up to that. There are some reports that President Trump is going to go to NATO in the next few months and try and pressure them to remove Pakistan from a list of these high-value intelligence partners. And if that happens, that would really be, you know, quite a big deal, quite a big loss for the Pakistani military, which enjoys, you know, one of the benefits of cooperation with the United States is they get access to our military technology. So, if that NATO designation were to pass, it could be a loss of prestige for the Pakistani military. So again, yes, it's created something of a diplomatic row here. The U.S. says we're going to withhold about $250 million in assistance, to the Pakistanis until, we see some sort of change in behavior with them. And it has led to, the Pakistanis summoning a big security meeting today and trying to figure out what to do here.
What are the best and worst case outcomes of this? It seems like the worst case outcome would be Pakistan saying, okay, we're going to just flip off this alliance and we're going to, create an alliance with China or with Russia and no longer be part of the Western Axis. Or that, somehow that leads to war between Pakistan and India. Seems like the best case would be that there might be some kind of minor regime change in Pakistan and a cleaning up of the political corruption and culture in that country. Am I out in la la land here or what?
No, the worst case scenarios are pretty close to what you just sketched out there. I mean, the best case scenario, and I've done some interviews on this in the past, is that the U.S. actually does sort of lean more heavily on the points of leverage we have over the Pakistanis, including that NATO designation, which has not been really used as leverage against them in the past. But I think another problem here is, we see the Trump administration really looking at this region through a military lens. That redo of Afghan policy involved, giving generals more ability to set policy in that region. But we've left a number of incredibly senior posts in that region unfilled, both at the State Department and elsewhere in the government. So it's concerning, I think, that what could be, in an ideal world, a pretty deft political maneuver is really not being complemented with any diplomatic efforts to speak of that we can see so far. So the tensions are going up, and it's sort of unclear what the second step is beyond this social media insult.
Meanwhile, there's South Korea has proposed direct talks with North Korea. There's a really thoughtful piece about this over in the Financial Times today about how essentially what Kim has done is he said to South Korea, choose. Are you going to be in it with Trump or are you going to be in it with us? What do you think?
Well, and it also drives a wedge not just between the U.S. and Seoul, but between the U.S. and Beijing. China has been quite supportive of the South Korean president and his repeated calls to use dialogue instead of threats to resolve this crisis. So, by going on TV in his New Year's message and offering up the possibility of direct talks, Kim Jong-un has validated the Korean president's strategy here and gotten China today through their foreign ministry to issue a big, very supportive comment on this. So I think you're right. It's possible these talks drive a wedge between the U.S. and its allies on this issue. I'll point out Trump also, falsely claimed in his tweet that the Rocket Man is now offering up direct talks with South Korea for the first time, which is false. I mean, direct talks occurred at a high level in December of 2015 and 2013 before that. So this notion that the sanctions and the tough line that President Trump is driving is what has opened up this diplomatic moment. I don't think we see signs to support that.
Luke, you're telling me that Donald Trump is lying when he takes credit for something?
He's also taking credit for the fact that there are no global airline deaths last year in the commercial airline sector. So I think he's pretty. He's claiming quite a lot of.
He's a hell of an airplane mechanic.
Territory for himself.
Yeah, he's been all over the world checking those engines and making sure everything. I think the biggest thing that has changed there as a pilot, I've observed this all over the last. I got my pilot's license in I think 1972, so it's been a while that I've been paying attention to this stuff. Is that back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and even the early 90s, commercial aircraft would fly into thunderstorms without a second thought, and now it just doesn't happen. And most of those deaths were weather related back in the day. I mean, there were a few famous airframe failures, but it was usually weather, and they've just gotten very, very conservative, very careful, let's say, about weather. Anyhow, Luke Vargas with Talk Media News. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you, Tom.
Great talking with you. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242.
Or visit tomsbeets.com.
Today on the Thom Hartmann Book Club with Thom Hartmann University, we're reading from what is apparently Donald Trump's second favorite book. His number one, according to his first wife, as I recall, was the collected speeches of Adolf Hitler, which was on his bed next to his, or on his bedstand next to his bed for years. But when he was asked by reporters his favorite book, he said P.T. Barnum's The Art of Money Getting, or Golden Rules for Making Money. So I thought, hey, let's check this out. This is from the introduction. Those who really desire to attain an independence, but have only to set their minds upon it and adopt the proper means, as they do in regard to any other object which they wish to accomplish, and the thing is easily done. But however easy it may be found to make money, I have no doubt many of my hearers will agree it is the most difficult thing in the world to keep it. The road to wealth is, as Dr. Ben Franklin truly says, as plain as the road to the mill. It consists simply in expending less than we earn. That seems to be a very simple problem. Mr. Micawber, one of those happy creations of the genial Dickens, puts the case in a strong light when he says that to have an income of £20 per annum and spend £20 and 6 pence is to be the most miserable of men, whereas to have an income of only £20 and spend but £19 and 6 pence is to be the happiest of mortals. Many of my readers may say, we understand this. This is economy, and we know economy is wealth. We know we can't eat our cake and keep it also. Yet I beg to say that perhaps more cases of failure arise from mistakes on this point than almost any other. The fact is, many people think they understand economy when they really do not. True economy is misapprehended, and people go through life without properly comprehending what that principle is. One person says, I have an income of so much, and here's my neighbor who has the same, yet every year he gets something ahead and I fall short. Why is it? I know all about economy. Well, he thinks he does, but he does not. There are many who think that economy consists in saving cheese parings and candle ends. Keep in mind, this was written in the late 1900s. In cutting off 2 pence from the laundress's bill and doing all sorts of little mean, dirty things. Economy is not meanness. The misfortune is also that this class of persons let their economy apply in only one direction. They fancy that they are so wonderfully economical in saving a half penny where they ought to spend 2 pence that they think they can afford to squander in other directions. A few years ago, before kerosene oil was discovered or thought of, one might stop overnight at almost any farmer's house in the agricultural districts to get a very good supper. But after supper, he might attempt to read in the sitting room and would find it impossible with insufficient light from just one candle. The hostess, seeing his dilemma, would say, it is rather difficult to read here in the evenings. The proverb said, you must have a ship at sea in order to be able to burn 2 candles at once. We never have an extra candle except on extra occasions. Those extra occasions occur perhaps twice a year. In this way, the good woman saves $5, $6, or $10 in that time, but the information which might be derived from having an extra candle would, of course, far outweigh a ton of candles. But the trouble does not end there. Feeling that she is so economical in tallow candles, she thinks she can afford to go frequently to the village and spend $20 or $30 for ribbons and furloughs, many of which are not necessary. This false economy may frequently be seen in men of business, and in those instances, it often runs to paper writing. You find good businessmen who save all the old envelopes and scraps and would not tear a new sheet of paper if they could avoid it for the world. This is all very well. They may in this way save $5 or $10 a year, but being so economical only in note paper, they think they can afford to waste time, to have expensive parties, and to drive their own carriages. This is an illustration of Dr. Franklin's, quote, saving at the spigot and wasting at the bunghole, or penny wise and pound foolish. Punch, and speaking of this one-idea class of people, says they are like the man who bought a penny herring for his family's dinner and then hired a coach and 4 to take it home. I never knew a man who succeeded to succeed by practicing this kind of economy. True economy consists in always making the income exceed the outgo. Wear the old clothes a little longer if necessary. Dispense with the new pair of gloves. Mend the old dress. Live on plainer food if need be. So that under all circumstances, unless some unforeseen accident occurs, there will be a margin in favor of the income. Penny here, a dollar there, placed at interest, goes on accumulating, and in this way, the real desire is attained. It requires some training, perhaps, to accomplish this economy, but once used to it, you will find there is more satisfaction in rational saving than in irrational spending. Here's a recipe which I recommend. I have found it to work an excellent cure for extravagance and especially for mistaken economy. When you find that you have no surplus at the end of the year and yet have a good income, I advise you to take a few sheets of paper and form them into a book and mark down every item of expenditure. Posted every day or week in 2 columns, one headed necessities, the other comforts, and the other headed luxuries. And you will find that the latter column will be double, triple, and frequently 10 times greater than the former. The real comfort of life costs but a small portion of what most of us can earn. Dr. Franklin said, "It is the eyes of others and not our own eyes which ruin us. If all the world were blind except myself, I should not care for fine clothes and furniture." It is the fear of what Mrs. Grundy may say that keeps the noses of most worthy families to the grindstone. In America, many persons like to repeat, "We are all free and equal," but it is a great mistake in more senses than one. That we are born free and equal is a glorious truth in one sense, yet we are not all born equally rich, and we never shall be. So anyhow, the book is The Art of Money Getting, or Golden Rules for Making Money by P.T. Barnum. It's actually a pretty good book. Banking, unequal protection.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. I am surrounded by Capricorns. I'll tell you, it's amazing. We had my daughter's fiance's birthday was yesterday. We were at his house for a party. Our oldest daughter's birthday was 3 days before that. Today is Arthur's birthday, the guy who will be answering the phone if you call. Happy birthday, Arthur. And, you know, it's just, wow. I love Capricorns. Sean and I love, you're a Taurus, right? We're here, you know, all these earth signs. Anyhow, I wanted to talk about a fascinating article in the Washington Post by Nicole Rogers and Rashad Robinson. And Rashad has been on this program a number of times with Color of Change. Nicole is with a group called Family Story. And they commissioned a research team out of the University of Illinois that specifically studies media and how people learn from media. What do they learn as a consequence of being exposed to media? And this has to do with public perception. And when we say public perception, I would say broadly white public, although, you know, white people are a majority of people in the United States. There, no doubt in my mind, some black people have internalized these negative stereotypes of black people. But it is far more destructive. Well, that's pretty damn destructive, but it's also quite destructive when white people who have economic and political power internalize these stories. And given that white people are a majority in this country, that would include white people who vote when they internalize these stories. And the stories that I'm talking about are stories that have to do with black people in the United States. The lens through which white people have viewed black people in this country since the founding of our republic. And by the way, not just black people. I mean, I grew up with Cowboys and Indians shows, right? And the Indians were always the bad guys, with the exception of Tonto, who had come over to be, you know, the best bud for the white guy. You know, we trashed Native Americans for a long, long time, but we've been trashing people of color literally from day one. We, you know, and also Hispanics to some extent. I mean, this is where the marijuana laws came from. Was you know, it was the Spanish word for cannabis. But well, here, from this piece that Nicole Rogers and Rashad Robinson wrote in today's Washington Post, the headline is, "How the News Media Distorts Black Families." And they point out that in 2016 on the campaign trail, Donald Trump basically said to Black America that they lived in a nightmarish world and that, you know, hey, vote for me. What the hell do you have to lose? Apparently, a lot, but that's a whole nother topic. But they write in the Washington Post, if your impression of black families comes mostly from what you see in the news and not just Fox News, then you might think black families have it worse today than when they were enslaved. You recall Judge Roy Moore saying that the happiest time in America was during slavery. Right. So anyhow, they commissioned this study to look at media coverage of black families. They looked at 800 relevant stories published from January 15 through December 2016 on ABC, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, The Washington Post, New York Times, USA Today, Fox News, CNN, etc. When the media outlets examined in the study, I'm reading from the story in the Post today, when the media outlets examined in the study reported stories about poor families, they chose to feature black families in their coverage 59%, even though only 27% of families living below the poverty line are black. So 3/4 of people who live below the poverty line in the United States are white. But when the media portrays poor people 6 out of 10 times, 4 out of, 6 out of 10? But that's not quite 4 out of 5, is it? But anyhow, 60% of the time, they are characterizing poor people as being black, number one. Number two, in the coverage of welfare, only 42% of families receiving welfare in the United States are black. Now, that's higher than the percentage of people in this country who are black, which is not surprising given our legacy of racism and slavery and everything else. But still, 42% is fewer than half of people in the United States who are on welfare are black. The majority are not. The majority of people on welfare in the United States are white. And yet 60% of the stories when they were covering welfare showed pictures of or footage of or B-roll of or whatever it may be. 60% of them showed black people when they were discussing welfare. They note the worst offenders for networks were Fox News and CNN, and for national print and online news organizations, the New York Times and Breitbart. They add, the news media habitually reinforce the myth that black fathers are less involved in their children's lives. Now, it is true that black kids are more likely to be in a single-parent household than white kids. Again, you know, the lingering, the remnants of poverty, racism, slavery, everything else. But black fathers are actually more engaged in child raising, whether they're married or not. They're more engaged in child rearing than white fathers or any other race. This is pretty remarkable. Just quoting, this is quoting the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Though black children are disproportionately born to single mothers, that doesn't mean that black fathers aren't involved. A 2013 study for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention showed that black fathers spend more time engaged in parenting than fathers of other races, participating more often in bathing, diapering, taking their kids to activities, and helping them with their homework. Now contrast that with Bill O'Reilly saying, the root cause of poverty, as Talking Points has reported over and over again, is the dissolution of the African-American traditional family. It's complete BS. There is literally no empirical evidence to support that claim. That the root cause of poverty is basically a moral failure of black people. No evidence for it at all. Yet that was Bill O'Reilly lived and died on that sword, as it were. They add, this coverage has real-life consequences. Prior research shows that when the news media constantly associates black people with crime, it increases racial stereotypes among viewers, leading the public to disproportionately favor punitive criminal justice policies. Now, we're looking at this, 27% of families below the poverty line are black, yet roughly 60% of the time when the media portrays poor people, they portray black people. I'm guessing that 30, 40, 50 years ago, it was more like 90, 95% of the time the media was portraying poor people as being black. I mean, the stereotypes, because in my mind, the evidence of that is how easily Nixon was able to prey on the fears of white Americans and pass his war on crime and his war on drugs and his war on everything, which was really a war on people of color, which brings us to where we are right now. They say it also leads to public support for heavier restrictions on welfare because of the perception that, quote, undeserving black people benefit from it, when in fact you got more white people who benefit from welfare. And if you really want to talk about who's benefiting from welfare, the biggest recipients of welfare are American corporations and foreign corporations, for that matter. We're talking trillions of dollars in welfare. You're contributing $15 to $30 a year for welfare for human beings every year out of your paycheck. You're contributing somewhere, it depends on whose numbers you're looking at, somewhere between $1,500 and $5,000 a year to support corporate welfare in the United States. But this is how it gets presented in the media. And I mean, this is just so wrong. And hopefully this article will cause people in some of these networks, the New York Times, I have no hope for Fox News or Breitbart, but hopefully it'll cause them to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe we should be more honest in our reporting. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's not even a matter of honesty. It's a matter of representing what is. I guess you could call that honesty. I'm not saying that they're trying to be dishonest. It's just a convention. And welcome back. Adam in New Springfield, Ohio, watching Free Speech TV. Hey, Adam, what's on your mind today?
Mr. Hartmann, how are you, sir? Happy New Year.
I am well, thank you. And Happy New Year to you, too.
Thank you. It's my first time getting through, but not my first time calling. You're a very popular man.
Thank you, Adam.
And you're speaking with another one of the great Capricorns, by the way.
Okay, great. Good on you. So what's on your mind today?
I did want to preface what I was going to ask you, though, by telling everybody, all of your viewers and listeners, that I'm a big-time documentaries fan. I really love them, and I learn a lot from them. And I recommend to everybody, if you want to know, like I'm Rust Belt USA, if you want to know how we got from the working class or blue-collar to the working poor, best documentary I've ever seen in my life. I own it, and I recommend it to everybody. It's called Heist: Who Stole the American Dream?
Oh, I narrated that movie.
Yes, you did. And it was absolutely brilliant. You can't argue the timeline.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's a brilliant documentary. It's called Heist: Who Stole the American Dream. Yep.
Very, very good documentary. Anyway, my question to you has to do with, you were speaking with Julio of Newsmax earlier. My condolences.
Thank you.
And you've had this conversation with many people before, and it seems to get mired into detail about the argument between the New Deal of Keynesian economics with proper checks and balances and trickle-down economics.
Right.
But Sam Brownback and some others of the Kansas legislature were very brave, and they stepped forward, I don't remember exactly how many years ago, and they said, we're going to run, in a very pure form, trickle-down economics to show this is going to work. This should be how we do things in America.
Right. In fact, Brownback held a press conference when he signed that legislation saying this will be the final proof that Reaganomics actually works. And, of course, it destroyed Kansas.
Yeah, and they went underwater, so much so that you had people who were Democrats in that state who flipped, or were Republicans who flipped to Democrats.
And you had a Republican-controlled legislature overturn Brownback's veto of a tax increase.
And this was a very pure form of trickle-down economics. And again, you got to give Brownback credit for taking the lead on this and saying, we're going to be an entire state that's going to run this grand experiment. But my question is, why haven't we seen that? We know now the results of Kansas.
Right.
And Alan Greenspan was right. He said trickle-down economics was a failed experiment.
Yep.
But why haven't we seen, I don't know how many years it might take to prove it or show it, 2 years, 10 years, whatever, take the Keynesian economics with the proper checks and balances that we used to have from the New Deal, what conservatives by and large call big government, be afraid,
right.
checks and balances, and run it. Run it and on a full state level, and let's see which one actually works. Which
well,
is better for the people.
It's already being run, Adam. Compare California to Kansas.
Now, is it just that California didn't come out specifically like Brownback did and said, we're running Keynesian economics to show and prove it works?
Right. No, California for several decades, I mean, well, even before Reagan became governor, California has been one of the most progressive states in the country. They've had, you know, they had free college until Reagan was governor. They have expanded their healthcare system repeatedly over the years. Their university system is world class. They've got great public utilities, and they have high taxes. You know, California is. I think the experiment's been run. The problem, Adam, is that you're not going to hear about this in the corporate media, because the corporate media doesn't care what wages are for average working people. They just want corporate tax breaks, right? And the people who own the media just want, you know, the billionaires just want tax breaks. That's the problem. Adam, thanks for the call.
Hi there, I'm Marie with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving donations, volunteering, or spreading the word about Free Speech TV, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to exist. And for that, I want to say thank you. Now you can give to the network powered by the people by donating an unwanted or used vehicle through our Vehicles of Change program. If you have an old car, RV, or even a motorcycle, Free Speech TV can use it to grow and thrive. You can make a bigger difference in supporting Free Speech TV by giving an old car. It's a great way to support the network without having to dig into your bank account. Just call 877-378-8669 and ask for more information about Vehicles of Change. Again, the number to call is 877-378-8669. If it has a VIN, we'll take it in. Thank you.
I'm Nina Turner, and you're watching Free Speech TV.
Of other things in the news, some along with the way that we characterize that we basically blackify, I don't know if that's a word or not, poverty in the United States and welfare in the United States. The media has been doing this for forever, and hopefully it'll get a little better. Hopefully it'll get a lot better. But then, just to bookend this, a couple of stories I'd like to share with you. This is from Florian Menevis. He is a Swiss bourgeois from Zurich's Golden Coast. And the question that was asked, this is over at Quora.com, Quora.com, are there any slums in Switzerland? And he says, no, there aren't. There are not slums because, A, Switzerland has strict construction laws and safety regulations. So if you're defining a slum as a place where the housing is dangerous in that, you know, it easily catches on fire or falls apart, that just doesn't exist in Switzerland. They will not tolerate a substandard housing, number one. Number two, they have tenancy laws. It makes it really hard for landlords to basically screw their customers. And you have a lot of rights as a renter in Switzerland, particularly if your landlord is not making sure that you have water and heat and all those kind of things. The kind of things, again, that characterize slums in the United States. Number three, they have this thing called social housing cooperatives in Switzerland. These are nonprofit organizations, regular apartment buildings, but they're financed by a social cooperative. And the social cooperatives are a form of incorporation that the government encourages, and the Swiss government gives loans to these social cooperatives, low interest, subsidized loans, to build these apartments for low-income people. So these social housing projects are, in fact, just regular apartment buildings that are financed by a social cooperative that has the mission to give the apartments for rent to people who meet certain criteria, usually families with children that earn less than X dollars per year. The rent will, on average, be about 15% lower than the market value because of the subsidies. And then the most important reason, the social safety net in Switzerland. If a resident, not just a citizen, a resident of Switzerland is unemployed, he or she receives unemployment aid for up to 2 years. the monthly unemployment aid is almost equal to a full salary. If he or she is, and there's no slums, because when people are unemployed, they don't have to move out of a decent house into a slum, right? I mean, here in America, you've got people literally going homeless. 1 in 10 American children experienced homelessness last year. Let that sink in. Not happening in Switzerland. If a resident is unemployed, you get unemployment for up to 2 years. It's a nearly full salary. If he or she is unable to find a job, there is either aid for disabled people or and for medical reasons. For example, you get a wheelchair, car modifications, etc. Aid is paid without a particular reason other than that a resident or citizen is unable to sustain himself. There are further programs, for example, for drug addicts, where they can receive lifelong administration of the drug they are addicted to by specialized government centers for that purpose. Yes, heroin addicts in Switzerland can shoot up in a government center. Yes. They don't need to live in slums. They can have a job. There are further programs, for example, for drug, I just read that. And then they say healthcare insurance is ubiquitous, so poverty as a result of illness is also not possible. It's not possible in Switzerland to fall into poverty because somebody got sick in your family. Whereas in the United States, it accounts for half of all bankruptcies. Conclusion, it is practically impossible for slums to form in Switzerland, as most people can live an ordered life by being employed or by receiving aid from Social Security facilities. So that's Switzerland. Now the United States. Here's where we're at as we slide further into Republican third world status. Michigan, this from the Associated Press, Dateline Lansing by David Eggert. Michigan is scrambling to combat potential health risks in other tap water, this is outside of Flint, that stem from chemicals long used in firefighting, waterproofing, carpeting, and other products. These are the flame retardants, anti-fire chemicals. They're called per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFASs. And the chemicals don't break down easily. They can migrate from soil to groundwater. Studies suggest the chemicals might affect fetal development, disrupt hormonal functions, damage fertility and immune systems, and boost the risk of cancer. And there's the 3M Scotchgard. This has apparently contaminated an area around where they used to make Wolverine clothing. Another lawsuit alleges that a family of 4 living near Wolverine's unlined tannery waste dump drank highly contaminated well water for 17 years, causing the father to develop colon cancer, the mother to have a miscarriage, one of their children to develop a rare bone cancer. Chemicals have been identified in 28 sites in 14 Michigan communities. For now, the Snyder administration and majority Republicans in the legislature are comfortable with the 70 parts per trillion standard, which is, by the way, not enforceable and unregulated. Other states, however, Minnesota and Vermont, have imposed stricter guidelines. They're also calling for legislative oversight hearings to investigate whether Wolverine and the state moved too slowly to protect people. All right, you think? And they go through, more on this. You can find it all over at the Associated Press. And then finally, just very quickly, a bank executive got a lifetime ban from banking. He was such a criminal or such an incompetent or both that the FDIC actually said this man can never for the rest of his life work in banking. So what did Scott Pruitt do? He made him a senior officer at the EPA.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Honest to God, this guy, Kelly is his name, he's now overseeing Superfund sites. The guy who's banned for his life from banking because he's such a perfidious individual.
Our Thom Hartmann University book review of the day is Richard Belzer's new book, Corporate Conspiracies, How Wall Street Took Over Washington. This is from the introduction. Of all the books we researched for this work, the title we loved the most was this one, Regime Change Begins at Home, Freeing America from Corporate Rule. We loved it because it presents as a hard fact something that very few people completely understand. And then he quotes from that book. Since 1980, America has been run by a corporate regime that has co-opted both political parties and shifted sovereignty from we the people
to transnational corporations, end of quote. Since this book covers some corporate conspiracies, we will no doubt take a lot of heat for that and be deridingly referred to as conspiracy theorists. So we would just like to remind people that the phrase conspiracy theorist was actually invented by the Central Intelligence Agency, to be used as a weaponized term with which to discourage people from seeking the truth. We kid you not. CIA document 1035-960, dated April 1, 1967, regarding the agency's concern about the reputation of the American government, in quotes. That document also suggested various tactics for countering, quote, conspiratorial arguments, which confronted the gaping holes critics observed in the findings of the Warren Commission, which investigated, in quotes, they really did no such thing in reality, the assassination of President Kennedy. Quote, the agency also directed its members to employ propaganda assets to negate and refute the attacks of the critics, end quote. So as you can see, and as the Freedom of Information Act release of that CIA document clearly reveals, the use of the term conspiracy theorist is actually a conspiracy itself. But if you believe rightly that Julius Caesar and hundreds of other leaders were the victims of conspirators, as they were, then you're an evil conspiracy theorist, right? Well, if anybody actually believes that, then you better read up on your history, boys and girls, because conspiracies are an ongoing and very common occurrence in human conduct. Now, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Are you aware that many friends of Robin Williams believe that his suicide was the direct result of the prescription drugs he was taking, and that over 23,000 suicides are attributed to psychiatric drugs each year in the United States? Did you know that turning prisons into a big business has resulted in the United States having the highest incarceration rate in the history of the world, and that most are just drug crimes? Are you aware that the historic event of the toppling of the statue of Saddam Hussein in Iraq was actually a U.S. military PSYOPs, psychological operations warfare, program, a completely orchestrated event with the knowledge and assistance of U.S. media, and not a spontaneous event as it was portrayed by our media? Did you know that the Pentagon is sending $1.5 trillion of our tax dollars to their corporate buddies for a new fighter jet that's already superfluous? Are you aware that continuing to rely on oil instead of investing in low-carbon energy solutions will cost us $44 trillion due to climate change? Did you know that companies like General Motors at times know that their products will kill people, but they do nothing because it's actually cheaper to compensate the victims than it is to correct the problem? Then read and learn on, friends. American corporations have been getting away with murder, literally, for many, many years. Just take a good look at their history. The above example of GM is a proven point. Corporate consumer advocate Clarence Ditlow, executive director of the nonprofit Center for Automotive Safety, bitterly criticized the settlement. Quote, GM killed over 100 people by knowingly putting a defective ignition switch into over 1 million vehicles, Ditlow said. Today, thanks to its lobbyists, GM officials walk off scot-free while its customers are 6 feet under. Tobacco companies knowingly lied about the harmful effects of cigarettes for decades, even though there was plenty of known medical proof of their damage. They even knowingly hid that information from the public. Oil, gas, and chemical companies have been knowingly polluting our planet with cancer-causing chemicals and products also for decades, and they know that they're doing it. Pharmaceutical companies have lied and attempted to minimize news coverage regarding the deaths that they know the drugs will cause. That's murder, plain and simple. Maybe you can paint a public relations damage control over that landscape if you happen to have all their tons of money and paid political influence, but it's still murder. Look at the parents of one of their victims straight in the eye and try and tell them it's not murder. Do you honestly think they'll listen to you? This book is an effort to reveal the insanity of corporate greed once and for all. At this point, most people probably care more about their local football team than they do about the workings of our democratic republic. And while we understand their frustration and their reasons, that's not good enough, folks. We have to all get involved to stop these bastards from getting away with what they've been getting away with for far too long. They're robbing us blind, poisoning our planet, hijacking our democracy, and ruining the futures of our children and grandchildren. They must be stopped. As an agent of the U.S. government employed to implement policies to benefit U.S. corporations, John Perkins noted in his classic work, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, that corporate America has extended its rule beyond our borders. Quoting from Perkins, what we had previously considered U.S. corporations were now truly international, even from a legal standpoint. Many of them were incorporated in a multitude of countries. They could pick and choose from an assortment of rules and regulations under which to conduct their activities,
And the multitude of globalizing trade agreements and organizations made this even easier. Corporatocracy had become a fact, and it increasingly exerted itself as the single major influence on world economics and politics. Sad to make this observation, but we have become a government of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations.
At thomhartmann.com/podcast. They're commercial free, and you can listen anytime, any place you want.
Looks like Orrin Hatch is taking the advice of the Salt Lake City newspaper, which ran an op-ed telling him that he should retire. He tweeted out saying, "Thank you for the nice editorial." Oh, what an embarrassment. He's also 80 years old. I mean, you know, it's a 6-year term, and really. So now everybody is like, okay, Mitt Romney's going to be the next senator from Utah, which is not going to make Donald Trump happy. But that's assuming that Donald Trump is still president on January 20th, 2019, which would be when the next senator from Utah will be sworn in. And that, in my opinion, is something that is still, shall we say, up in the air. I wanted to share one other quick story with you, and then I'll pick up your phone calls here. We have known for a long time, and I refer you, for example, to the website nutritionfacts.org, which is run by Dr. Michael Greger, who's been a guest on this program. And what Dr. Greger promotes is an all plant-based diet, 100% plant food-based diet. No animal products, no butter, no cheese, no dairy products, and of course no meat or fish or anything like that. Just nothing but vegetables and grains and fruits, you know, that kind of stuff. And he documents, he's got a couple of videos on his homepage. One of them is an hour-long speech he gave, the 15 leading causes of death in the United States, and how every single one of those 15 leading causes of death is reduced. The chance of death is reduced by going on a plant-based diet. And a lot of this seems to have to do with fiber. Now, the assumption for a long time was that fruits and vegetables have all kinds of wonderful nutrients that you need, and that's probably true. But they have found that there's something unique about fiber. Now, we call dietary fiber insoluble or indigestible because humans cannot digest it. It passes through, in theory. But it turns out that we've got billions of bacteria in our gut that can digest the dietary fiber, the plant-based fiber. And they break these, when they digest the fiber, it breaks it down into short-chain fatty acids, which pass into our bloodstream and reduce inflammation. Also, when you have a low-fiber diet, it turns out, and this is just amazing research that Carl Zimmer is reporting in the New York Times. The headline is, "Fiber is good for you, now scientists may know why." This was in yesterday's paper. We also know that when people go on diets that are low in fiber, when they eat basically McDonald's, well, they did this with mice. And here, just some fascinating studies. Excuse me. I don't know if that sneeze made it on the air, if I hit my button right, but my apologies. Anyhow, they put the mice on a low-fiber, high-fat diet. The guy who was running the study, his name is Dr. Bached. He said it's basically what you get at McDonald's: a lot of lard, a lot of sugar, and 20% protein. Shifting the animals, this is from the article, shifting the animals to a low-fiber diet had a dramatic effect. They found many common species of intestinal bacteria became rare, and rare species of bacteria became common. There were also rapid changes in the mice themselves. Their intestines got smaller, and the mucus layer got thinner. As a result, bacteria wound up closer to the intestinal wall, and that encroachment triggered an immune reaction. That's called inflammation. After a few days on the low-fiber diet, mouse intestines developed chronic inflammation. The mice began putting on fat and developing higher blood sugar levels. So then they gave the mice some fiber. They used, in this case, inulin, which is a fiber that's found in, particularly in Jerusalem artichokes. And what they found was that when they gave them that fiber, in addition to the high-fat, McDonald's diet, the mucus layer in their guts was healthier than in the mice that didn't get fiber, and the intestinal bacteria were kept at a safer distance from the intestinal wall. But he said that's not enough. He said the improvements, if you go with a real high dose of fiber, In other words, if you go back to a plant-based diet, the improvements are even more dramatic. The mice had healthy populations of bacteria in their guts. Their intestines were closer to normal, and they put on less weight. Gut bacteria, they concluded, help maintain a peaceful coexistence with the immune system. And going on a low-fiber diet disturbs this peaceful relationship, the new study suggests. The bacterial species that depend on dietary fibers starve, as do the other species that depend on them. Some species may switch to feeding on the host's own mucus. As a result, bacteria edge closer to the intestinal wall, and the immune system kicks into high gear. And this then leads to inflammation, and inflammation leads to cancer and heart attacks and all these other things. Excuse me. Not to mention, they said lowering inflammation with fiber may also help in the treatment of immune disorders such as inflammatory bowel disease. We thought giving people fiber helped IBS because it moved stuff through faster. Nope, turns out it helps it because it decreases inflammation by feeding the bacteria in the gut, the good bacteria in the gut, what they need. Fiber may also help reverse obesity. They found fiber supplements helped obese people lose about 5 pounds on average. Simply adding one kind of fiber to the Western diet won't be a panacea, he said, because we depend on a number of different kinds of dietary fiber we get from plants. But as my friend Earl Katz would say, beans, good for you. Yes, the old musical fruit. Yep. Anyhow, Patrick in Minneapolis. Hey, Patrick, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. A long-time listener, first-time caller, and podcast subscriber.
Thank you. What's on your mind?
I wanted to challenge the Newsmax guest's his proposal that somehow the corporate tax breaks are going to increase employment, which is the excuse that's been given for decades now, right?
Right.
But I'm going to propose that no, it won't, because they've already hired and employed everyone they need to make the goods they're making or to provide the services they're providing. What are they going to do? Like hire additional people to make services that nobody wants? No.
Right.
Are they going to hire people to make products and then warehouse them? And if they do, well, then they're going to lay people off.
Right. Yeah, so, no, it's a nonsensical argument, Patrick. It was a nonsensical argument from the very beginning. In fact, in 1980, in the primary campaign where George Herbert Walker Bush was running against Ronald Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush called this whole idea voodoo economics.
Oh yeah, and there's more than just that way to attack it. It's like if you're gonna give tax credits for the purposes of increasing employment, then why not bundle it with enforceable law?
Right.
So, hey, AT&T will give you your $1 billion tax cut, but you got to spend $900 million employing people where you don't get it.
Well, but then they're not going to do that because really what they're trying to do is simply give money to the donor, to the Republican donor class. That is the beginning and end of the whole thing. This whole tax bill was a way of transferring money to the Republican donor class, both the personal, individual Republican donor class and the corporate Republican donor class. And, they were successful in doing that. I expect not only no benefit to working class people, but actually I suspect that over the next couple of years, if this tax cut stays in place, over the next couple of years, you're going to see wages collapse just like they did after the Reagan tax cuts and just like they did after the George W. Bush tax cuts. So anyhow, Patrick, I got to move along, but thanks for listening to KTNF and thanks for the call. Johnny in Lamarck, Texas. Hey, Johnny, what's on your mind today?
Good afternoon, Tom. Both Ivanka and I wish you and yours a belated happy holidays.
Well, thank you. You know Ivanka?
No, but I know she would wish you happy holidays.
Oh, okay.
She's done it before.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Yeah, I get it now. Sorry.
Listen, there's a gentleman who spoke to you about 10 minutes to the hour earlier. He put forth this idea about citing and making responsible politicians who fail to tell the truth. And I thought that was kind of problematic because it's a little bit too nebulous. Mm-hmm. But this is a symptom of what we have now because politicians on both parties, especially the Republican side, have just ignored rule of law for so long. And people vote, and then they don't vote when they find out that the campaign promises made to them get violated 180 degrees, not just by this guy in office right now, but Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. So here's my idea.
I'm listening.
Okay. So when someone who runs for a governor of their state or the president of the United States they campaign in a certain direction. And then as soon as they take the oath of office, they start acting in the opposite direction. For example, Barack Obama is starting to fill his cabinet with Clinton people, which a lot of people on the left didn't like. There should be some kind of immediate mechanism to put a halt to that and give that president a certain amount of days to respond and defend his decision. And if he fails to convince a majority of his voters, then he pays a fine and he has to do something different.
Yeah, the problem, you know, what we're all trying to get our hands around here, Johnny, is the idea of honesty in politics. And I would submit to you that you can't legislate honesty in politics. But what you can do is you can create political systems where people who are honest are more successful and people who are dishonest are less successful. And what we've done, what the Supreme Court has done with the Buckley case in '76 and Citizens United in 2010, is the exact opposite of that. They have created a political system where those who tell the lies, if they have enough money to convince people of those lies, will be the victors. And so ultimately, if we want our politics to be clean, if we want people to be telling us the truth, because the vast majority of these lies are being told to protect the interests of specific factions, of specific corporations or industries or groups of wealthy people, if we simply got money out of politics, if we could pass a constitutional amendment like MoveToAmend.org works so hard to make happen, we could pass a constitutional amendment saying, no, corporations are not people, speech is not, or money is not speech, and end of subject. You know, we're reversing the Supreme Court's unconstitutional creating of law and policy. I think that would be a huge first step. I get what you're talking about, John.
I think we could do both. Otherwise,
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Your calls in just a moment. Welcome back. Steve in Blacksburg, Virginia. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind?
Oh, yeah, Tom, it's great to talk to you again. I've called you about a half dozen times since Charlottesville. But the one thing I'm really worried about now is that we've really got a real movement towards the Democratic side coming this year.
Yeah.
But we need to come up with a message.
Agreed. And I think the message...
I would love to see you sit down with Dr. Wolf, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders and come up with a really positive message for the Democrats.
Well, they've already started that. I mean, the Democratic Party has come out and said that enforcement of the Sherman Act, breaking up monopolies, is at the top of their list. I think that's huge, although most Americans don't understand that or the consequences.
We can't run as negative to the Republican mentality of...
right. Well, you run that as supporting small and medium-sized businesses. We're going to break up the big monopolies so that small and medium-sized businesses can flourish. But I think that plus Medicare for all, you know, are good, and strengthening Social Security.
Well, I was going to say these working-class people that basically have been voting Republican ever since Reagan. As Sarah Palin would say, how's that worked out for you?
Right. Well, I think we should also lower the eligibility age for Social Security and Medicare to 60, as many European countries have done. And what that does is that takes several million people out of the workforce, which is going to tighten up the labor markets, which is going to drive up wages. And it's also going to create a lot of openings for millennials.
I'm scared what these doggone tax cuts are going to do to us. Because they're going to try to slash Social Security, slash Medicare, slash Medicaid.
Yep. And
basically, it's such a Christian ideal to leave the widows and the children behind while the billionaires get all the money.
Yeah. It's not. This definitely is not Jesus. But Steve, I agree with you, and I guarantee you that right now there's a bunch of Democrats sitting around working out what should be our message, and I'm thinking about it too. So any suggestions you or anybody else has, we should create a list. What would be on your list?
I just want to thank you, Tom. You were like my college course class every day, giving me more education, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for your call and for your kind words. Joni in Lake Hughes, California. Hey, Joni, what's up?
Hi,
Tom, Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year, Joni. What's on your mind?
Thanks. Well, to introduce the topic, the question that we have 3 generations of progressive activist women at my house right now. Mm-hmm. And my mom's 86. She worked on that farm workers' great boycott you were talking about. And my daughter's at Berkeley working on gentrification issues and such. Mm-hmm. Our question is about the elections. If you were going to pick an organization that is the best at registering voters, who would you say it would be?
I'm not sure who's the best. I know Color of Change is doing some great work in this area. The Democratic Party is doing great work in this area.
I'm wary of the Democratic Party since the Bernie fiasco stuff.
Yeah, Color of Change is a great organization. I think it's colorofchange.org. Yeah, they their emphasis, of course, is on getting minority communities registered to vote, but it's and other issues around that. But Color of Change, check out their website. I'm pretty sure it's colorofchange.org. They do great. Rashad Robinson has been on the program before. They do great work. Let me think about that, Joni. If maybe we can come up with some more. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Nate was just telling me, I said, Nate, you got any suggestions for other organizations that are doing voter registration? Because somebody just called and said, hey, what we want to help out an organization that's going to help register people to vote democratically. And I said, well, colorofchange.org is a great organization. And then I said to Nate and Sean, any other suggestions? And Nate said, you can start your own organization. I did that in Maryland a few years ago. Just start registering people to vote. Cool. Okay. You could do that too. George in Eureka, California. Hey, George, what's on your mind today?
Thank you so very much. Why are we using Republican talking points to be able to describe situations that are disastrous? We're using death taxes for one thing.
I don't use that phrase.
I know you don't, but most of the other ones, that's what they uniformly do. The other one is curtail entitlements. Why not use the word restrict human rights?
Right.
That's what they're doing.
Or how about just kill off old people?
Yeah, and the other one is they're saying cut whatever the food stamp thing. Don't say that. Say cut food.
Right.
Literally use the words that describe the action that they're using, rather than their phrases.
Or throw people into malnutrition and starvation. Yeah, George, you're right. There is a lot of messaging that could be done better on the Democratic side. It never will be, in all probability, because the Republicans tend to be very top-down. And so, a bunch of billionaires go to Frank Luntz, as the Walton family did years ago, and said, how do you come up with a way to change America's idea about the inheritance tax? Frank Luntz tested the hell out of the thing and came up with death tax. They paid him a bunch of money for that, and death tax has migrated throughout our and all the Republicans fell into line on that. With the Democrats, it's more, herding cats. What's the old saying that Chris Matthews loves to quote? Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line, and I think it's true. But still, we can get better at this, and I'm with you, George. You and your namesake George Lakoff, who's been on this for a long, long time. We absolutely have to be doing this. George, thanks for the call. Jim in Jupiter, Florida. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I was looking up the numbers on the deaths on the job, and it turns out that the sanitation workers actually have a death on the job per 100,000 that is about 3 times higher than police.
Yes.
Roofers are about 4, and a little bit more than 4.
Yeah, being a cop is not even in the top 10 most dangerous professions in America.
Yeah, they're like they're not even in the top 10. Loggers are like 7-8 times more likely to get killed on the job.
Yep.
So I think that, and the other, like 17, number 10 is grounds maintenance workers.
Yeah.
And then it's farmers, ranchers, truck sales, truck drivers, iron steel workers. So, every time I turn on the TV, I know they do a good job most of the time. But I think we need to really look at this in perspective, everything in perspective, when we talk about stuff like this.
Yeah, we fetishize police in this country, and I think part of it is that if you look at the television business, in order to sell fictional programming, you have to have compelling programming. You have to have, good shows that people want to watch. And you always want to be pushing the edges. You want to be pushing the boundaries. Well, what is the most unspeakable crime that a human being can commit? It is the killing of another human being. And so most of your cop shows are only cop shows because they're really about murder. They're really about the killing of another human being because that's the most extreme thing somebody can do. So it makes for the most intense drama. Now, if you're going to talk about murder, then you have to talk about law enforcement because law enforcement comes in to fix that murder. And so what's happened is that using this very, very powerful thing of killing, of murder as a crime, has created this whole genre of cop shows. And then the cop shows have, and you can understand why that would be, right? From the point of view of the movie and television industry, they like I said, they want to make money. They want to have shows that people want to watch. But the result of the cop shows has been, particularly the really violent ones where the cops routinely break the law themselves, like Hawaii Five-0, the outcome of the cop shows is that those cop shows have, they're training police in how to be even more brutal in many cases, and B, they cause people to fetishize police. And, cops are just like the rest of us. I mean, most cops in most places have got a pretty good job. It's good pay, good benefits, good pension. You can get out in 20, 25 years and have an early retirement. We should honor our police just like we should honor anybody else who's working with us. So anyway.
One more thing, that the police death rates were actually doubled during Prohibition. They actually doubled during Prohibition, and they went up again during the height of the drug war. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're seeing the same thing in Mexico, in Central and South America as a result of the drug wars there. California just legalized pot, effective yesterday, and that this whole drug war thing has been causal in an awful lot of violence.
Everybody loses on this one.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, Jim, thanks for the call. Fran, you get the last 40 seconds of the show here, Fran. Thanks for calling from Seattle. What's on your mind?
Oh, the Poor People's Campaign. This year is the 50th anniversary of the Poor People's Campaign, and there are groups that are planning events around the country, hopefully around the world.
Great.
It's interesting you bring up the subject of poverty today and how that cuts across racial lines. The Poor People's Campaign was racially integrated, and the funny thing is most people don't know about it. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to hear some.
Is there a website that you would recommend, Fran?
Oh, there is, but I don't have the URL handy.
Okay. It should be easy enough to DuckDuckGo it. Fran, thanks a lot for the call, and thanks for listening to SiriusXM, Fran. And thank you for being with us today. It's a brand new year, a year filled with opportunity, a year filled with possibility, a year when we can all figure out what we're going to do this year to make the world a better place, to make our country a more compassionate and functional nation. And, to clean up our politics, we can do this, right? We can do this. We just have to be engaged. Democracy is not a spectator sport. You need to get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeats.com.